Let's get right into it. I feel it helpful to contextualize these issues and set the background for what we may be discussing tonight via some critical questions. Is there a trans agenda? If so, is this an ideology that is being exported globally, now to cultures that naturally view it as a hostile entity to their culture, public morals, and future existence? Are there particular geopolitical zones that are being targeted first as a sort of proof of concept or testing ground before it might be developed even further to expand its influence? My position is that there certainly is a transgender agenda, a lobby that is the further flowering of the seeds of the LGBT lobby, which had its critical emergence out of the 1970s and earlier 1960s countercultural revolutions in the United States. This is a movement which, from its infancy, has had its power and influence, especially in the United States, molded through the unaccountable halls of bureaucratic fiat. Just as from its noxious origins, it currently seeks to sow the cultural milieu in the exact same way elsewhere around the world. Many societies have rightly thus proclaimed this to be a foreign and destructive ideology. The Balkans, Eastern Europe, Africa, and the Near and Far East, as a result, must be vigilant in this matter, as all societies should be. And I'm generally supportive of the cultural vanguard against this agenda. In his landmark book, The Death of the West, Patrick J. Buchanan lays out the following, quote, in 1973, the American Psychiatric Association was bullied by gay rights militants into delisting homosexuality as a disorder. Now, anyone who considers it a disorder suffers himself from a sickness of the soul called homophobia. Homosexual acts are against nature's law, said Pope John Paul II. This restatement of Catholic moral teaching marks the Holy Father, and all who accept that teaching as true as homophobic. Scholar and author Paul Gottfried calls it the dehumanization of dissent, end quote. Couldn't have really said it better myself in some ways. As an Orthodox Christian, I care not for the authority or opinions of the Roman Pontiff and his Latin Church. But with this, I'd like to illustrate the ubiquity of ethical treatises on natural law amongst the overwhelming majority of cultures of mankind. Sex has its place in all civilizations as the biological function which ensures the continuing existence of the nation. The postmodern views on sex and gender as matters of prerogative and power are not but thinly veiled attacks on civilization in the name of a satanic liberalism which offers nothing but this clear consequence: decay, which is the thesis of Patrick Buchanan's book. Further, a paraphrase from EU Parliament member Terry Rentke back in September. Quote, a very important European event is set to take place in Belgrade. It's Europride. It's a demonstration for freedom, for democracy, for fundamental rights and diversity, a pan-European demonstration. Unfortunately, it has been canceled by Serbian authorities. But I wanted to use this opportunity for this parliament to show that we are a parliament that stands for the fundamental right of freedom of assembly, and with the LGBTI community all across the European community and in Serbia and in Europe, end quote, said to a total standing ovation. It seems clear to me, and hopefully all else, what the strategies and aims are here. Packaging these ideologies in bows topped with buzzwords like freedom, democracy, and fundamental rights, truly, it seems any poison is marketable with the right branding and messaging. The European Union is but one of a host of organizations with bureaucratic officials which use their reach to any aims well beyond the scope of their organization. For reference, Serbia is not part of the European Union. Here is but a cursory list of other organizations that contribute to LGBT activism around the world: the Open Society Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and the Clinton Foundation. I'll wrap up this opening with but one more quote. Quote, every state is a community of some kind, and every community is established with a view to some good. For mankind always act in order to obtain that which they think good. But if all communities aim at some good, the state or political community, which is the highest of all, and which embraces all the rest, aims at a good in a greater degree than any other, and at the highest good. He who thus considers things in their first growth and origin, whether a state or anything else, will obtain the clearest view of them. In the first place, there must be a union of those who cannot exist without each other, namely, of male and female, that the race may continue. And this is a union which is formed not of deliberate purpose, but because, in common with other animals and with plants, mankind have a natural desire to leave behind them an image of themselves, and of natural ruler and subject, that both may be preserved. End quote. Aristotle, Politics, Book 1. Thank you. I cede my time.
Whenever you're ready, Naomi, go ahead.
Yeah, that was quite the hilarious opening statement, mostly because my opponent really did not provide any arguments as to why being gay or being trans is a bad thing, other than classic logical fallacies, such as the appeal to nature fallacy, saying that something is bad if it's non-natural or natural, which is completely besides the point, because being gay, it exists in nature. There are even animals that change their sex or their gender in nature. These are all things that do exist in nature, and even appealing to that would be a logical fallacy. The other logical fallacies he utilized were the genealogical fallacy, to suggest that, you know, just because certain political organizations or corporate organizations, you know, support something, it has to be good or bad because of it. That it's a logical fallacy to condemn something based off of, you know, just kind of like the organizations or whoever supports it. Rather, we should be discussing the actual merits of these topics, something which my opponent is seeming to be wanting to avoid doing, especially in his opening statement. The other logical fallacy we encountered was the ad populum fallacy, where he was appealing to what kind of like most cultures have perceived about something. I mean, if we look throughout history, most cultures have appealed to slavery, which I think we can hopefully agree is a bad thing. So just because something has been popular throughout history in the past doesn't mean it's a good or bad thing. So I would like to focus on the actual merits of, you know, being gay, being trans, etc. And as far as what my opponent was discussing, if there's like a trans agenda, I mean, if there was a trans agenda, I think I would have gotten a copy at this point. I simply haven't seen any. Rather, we just want to be respected and live our lives peacefully as we are. I'm a freedom-loving American. I believe in inalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. People should have the liberty to do with their life what makes them happy, so long as they don't impede on the rights of others. And I think this freedom applies to LGBT people. I really dislike it when society tries to push people into these gendered boxes that aren't right for them, or when governments try to limit the individual freedoms of LGBT people, who do no harm to themselves or society simply by existing as they are. In fact, the overwhelming body of peer-reviewed science and research demonstrates that, you know, medical transition, support for trans people and gay people improves their mental health, improves their overall well-being, and this allows them to become happy, healthier, more productive members of society, which helps us all in the long run. And so also any kind of like concerns which people might raise surrounding the inclusion of trans people or gay people in society have been thoroughly debunked in the academic literature. It's just fear-mongering, plain and simple, unfounded and unsupported by any empirical data. So I think that we should drop this baseless fear-mongering and support, you know, the truly based freedom and liberty that I think is awesome and everybody should have access to. So yeah, I'd like to focus on the merits and focus on the things that we can do that help people, because that's what I care about.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I might echo here, but yeah, that was a interesting retort, let's say. I guess I'll try tackling it from the accusations of fallacy. The naturalist fallacy, which is incorrectly used here, because I think most people in this whole debate bro scene, as it's called, seem to have a false view of what fallacies are. I mean, if I ask you right now, Naomi, what is a fallacy?
That would be an invalid argument, an invalid you construct which does not prove the point you intend to prove.
All right, why is it invalid?
So, because something is neither good or bad, simply if it is natural versus unnatural. We can list lots of examples of things that are unnatural that are good, such as modern medicine, and we can list lots of examples of things that are natural that are bad, such as hurricanes, tornadoes, cancer.
Well, I don't think modern medicine is unnatural, but I mean, let's tackle the issues one at a time. So the naturalist fallacy, you didn't seem to address where my fallacy was in just saying that because the traditional ethical stance of both Christian and, I guess in Aristotle's case, pagan ethics on things like unnatural acts or irrational acts.
You made a claim that homosexuality is against the natural law and therefore bad, right?
Because it is.
That's the naturalistic fallacy. That is literally the naturalistic fallacy.
Well, no, I mean, nature has a particular being, right? Like nature exists. I'm not just like
Yes,
looking
nature
at
is
some
real, but
abstract
saying that
like
something is
entities like
good because
Andrew
it's
and you here,
natural
right?
or something that is bad because it's unnatural, that's the logical error. That's the logical fallacy.
Well, natural law as it's conceived of in the Christian context. So, for example, I'm a presuppositionalist, like Orthodox Christian, in terms of apologetics. I might look at other philosophies to gander what might be true or what might be good for like personal, rational desires. But when we say something is against nature, therefore it's bad, it's against nature because it's against the divine positive law, which is sort of, it's not the same. It Nature is a reflection of its creator,
Well,
which
then
obviously I assume you're an atheist.
why don't we focus on what that divine positive is? If you can demonstrate the positives of, say, outlawing homosexuality, I think that we should discuss that rather than appealing to nature.
No, divine positive law, like the positive means that the law, the fundamental constructs of reality are posited by a transcendental being, in this case, the triune Orthodox Christian conception of God. And it's very clear in Revelation of, I mean, not just Christianity, but almost every theological system on this earth, that homosexuality is an aberration and a perversion of nature, for one, because it is not productive. I'm not trying to blanket everybody who has sort of non-productive reproductive practices, even though I think they're sins and they are sins.
Have you ever had sex for
Uh,
pleasure?
I haven't had sex, period, but
Okay. Do
because
you think it's okay if people
I'm
have
waiting for
sex for
therapy.
pleasure?
I think the pleasure aspect of sex is one of the reflections of its nature as an act. It's pleasurable because bringing life is supposed to be pleasurable. But
So,
like
but
any
what if somebody
act,
wants to have like pleasurable sex, say like with their wife, for example, but not want to have a kid at that very moment? Like is that okay?
well, sure, in some sense. I
But
mean,
that's not
I'm not
productive.
sodomy and oral
Wait,
sex. I
wait.
think are sins, but
We
the
can't do blowjob. Wait. How can we do vaginal for pleasure, but we can't do oral for pleasure?
because it's mutual masturbation. It is not seeking to the highest good, even in a pagan sense. And Aristotle himself doesn't really
I
extrapolate too
think
much on what the good is, but
I think that if
it's
people
some.
want to enjoy having a pleasurable experience with their husband or wife, that seems like a perfectly reasonable thing to do. And I mean, there are so many people, even within, say, the Christian doctrine, it seems pretty well established in the Christian doctrine that things like oral sex, things like sex for pleasure without the intent of procreation, are commonplace throughout the Bible and throughout Christian doctrine. Just
I
to
mean, I hate
suggest
to
that
pull up a meme, but citation needed.
homosexuality is
Like, where? Sorry, I have to interrupt you there, but
like
where are
Song
you
of
getting
Songs, right?
these?
There's like what's the verse about like
We're
about
so
tasting people's genitals? There's
so I
verses
don't
about this in the
hang on, hang
Bible.
on, hang on, hang on, both you guys. I don't mind that the debate instantly kind of went down this road, but I do need one of you to begin to tie it back into the actual topic of the debate. So if you can thread the
Yeah,
needle back into this, that would be wonderful for the audience. Go ahead.
yeah. So going back to the LGBT agenda, and I mean, I don't think of the whole transgender phenomenon as anything but a further progression of the LGBT agenda, which I mean progresses into other aberrations of nature in terms of sexuality. I mean,
So
I've demonstrated that there are uh, these sort of NGOs and bureaucratic, like transnational organizations that really seek to. It's okay. It's one thing if these EU member states of the United States, by virtue of civil law and legislation, tries to hand wave away the divine positive law in terms of teachings on matters of morality and ethics. But I mean, I think it's clear. I don't think it's a genealogical fallacy, for example, to say, like one of the other things that were brought up, to say that there is this agenda and using evidence to to that point that powerful institutions are doing this. First of all, as I said, we
if
didn't
you
even
are
get to the point of what a fallacy is. A fallacy is a non sequitur. You're basically making a rational mistake by not providing the correct logical evidence to prove your point. If I am saying that there is an agenda out there to let's take out of the US. I'm an American too. I live in Serbia right now. I'm an expatriate of 6 years. I live in a non EU member state, nothing with diplomatic ties to these organizations, but nothing else. So why then are these powerful institutions trying to bring it here and elsewhere in the world, but more properly the European continent, which seems to get the brunt of it even outside the EU sphere of influence?
I do not think that there's any kind of like global trans agenda. Rather, what these corporations do is they just act in their own best interest, and that involves following the
Well,
cultural
this isn't a
attitude. That
corporation. You
involves
understand it, right?
allow me to
Let
explain.
Naomi finish.
That
Let Naomi
involves
finish.
following the cultural attitudes of whatever place they're in. And I actually did some research on this. In Serbia, most people do believe that trans people should be protected from discrimination. And so if most people kind of
What
have
is
this
that?
cultural attitude that
What's the citation for that? Sorry, I have to interrupt
hang
there.
on, hang on. You gotta.
oh, this comes from
But if we're gonna have some back and forth, that's okay. But if you have a lot of points that you put down at a single time, try to give the opposition enough time to address each of those points, or try to keep the points more concise. But
yeah,
I have to try to give some kind of fair time here. Go ahead, Naomi.
this comes from the
Yeah.
Global Attitudes Towards Transgender People survey, which was a global survey across 16 different countries. And what they found was that most people in Serbia do support that trans people should not be discriminated against. And when most people kind of have this cultural attitude that, yeah, you know, this say marginalized group, they should be protected, they should be allowed to exist socially. That is the prevailing social attitude, which means corporations are incentivized to put forth, you know, essentially, at least performatively, an attitude of we support what most people support. That's why in America, for example, as attitudes towards LGBT people have become more and more popular, more and more mainstream, corporations' support for LGBT people has become more and more mainstream. The broad cultural attitudes of corporations just falls in line with the broad cultural attitudes of the population of, you know, states, cities, etc., simply because it's most profitable for them to do so. This is more so a critique of capitalism than transgenderism or whatever one you want to call it. And if we're critiquing capitalism, I'm there for it. I think it's a problem that these corporations are only performative in their support for LGBT people, for example. I don't think that they are genuinely our allies. I mean, we see how they back legislation that harms us. So yeah, I think that is pretty much a non sequitur, but like if you're trying to say that, you know, being trans or something is bad because these global organizations support them, then that would be the genealogical fallacy. But if you're just using it to discuss about, you know, oh, there are corporations that support trans people, sure, that simply follows from, you know, it's within their best interest to match the cultural attitudes of the places that they, you know, operate in.
All right, I assume you're done. We're making a category error here because I said it's not bad just because, like, you know, these talking heads that get brought up in quote unquote conspiracy circles like George Soros and Bill Gates are contributing to this LGBT activism. As far as I'm aware, it's more so in the US than anywhere else, but that's something else. The EU is not a corporation, it is a transnational bureaucratic organization of member states. So I don't know where this whole capitalism critique comes in. I mean, I'm not idolater of capitalism, but it's not. I have my personal critiques of it, but I don't think it's a unhealthy economic system a priori. I mean, I guess that's how I would.
I do remember you
tackle
mentioned
that.
talking about corporations that were supporting this or multinational corporate institutions, but we're talking about political
Non-governmental
institutions.
organizations, yeah.
If we're talking about political institutions, then I think it's a good thing that political institutions do support the rights of marginalized groups of people. And we know that both in the US and Serbia, trans people, LGBT people are marginalized. They're denied legal rights that, you know, cis people and straight people have. They are, you know, subject to hate crimes at disproportionate rates. These are things that they do face. And I think that, you know, having political organizations that stand up for people that face institutional, systemic, and violence against them just for their identity as a marginalized person, that's a good thing.
So the capitalism and corporatism, I mean corporatism, not the, I guess, the actual ideology, but the sort of connotation of that. It's good when it does support the whole LGBT agenda, right? But it's bad when it's, you know, private property and capitalistic.
I don't really support the corporate elite. I think that it's convenient that they're public facing, like positions are positive towards marginalized people, but I think that they're just performative in that because, you know, in terms of how they actually donate to political campaigns, they donate against us. They donate for candidates that do not support our rights. I think that it can be slightly positive as far as like cultural impact, but I think that overall they do have a negative impact on our rights and our fight for liberation because of
So this is
how
a
they
sleight
actually.
of hand. This is a sleight of hand when we're talking about Bill Gates or like some of these people. So like, you know, they'll throw $100,000 at like, you know, Donald Trump or Lindsey Graham or like these kinds of characters, and then and then conservative vanguard, and then that's sort of evidence towards like the persecution of the LGBT community.
Well, yeah, because these candidates
Wherever, because
support bills that would take away our rights.
well, again, you made like another like wild claim that I guess there is support amongst the LGBT community in Serbia. I mean, I'm not denying that there are like, you know, LGBT people in Serbia, but this is a country where gay marriage is not legal status.
You're correct.
So
I thought it was very interesting in the data that people were more supportive of trans people than gay people, which was very interesting.
I mean, because most people also don't even understand like this kind of verbiage. Like if you look at talking heads on media organizations like Legacy TV, like people bring that up all the time. I mean, Legacy TV is still the norm media in these former communist blocs, and they don't even talk about the whole transgender phenomenon or like postmodern or Foucault views on gender and sex and these kinds of things. So obviously, like
I have
no,
a source that disagrees with that. I have a analysis of the global attitudes towards trans people survey by the Williams Institute that essentially analyzed that there is strong media rhetoric against LGBT people, which is largely responsible for the people that are, you know, that are against people. They found trends of false rhetoric describing, let's see, it was aggressive transsexual propaganda and pedophilia, like painting LGBT
yep.
people as those who rule the world, trying to impose their transsexual propaganda and pedophilia. These are just false media narratives that are being spread there.
Well, no, I agree with that in some sense. I think the whole LGBT phenomenon is a further, it's a normalization strategy to getting to these kinds of obviously pathological sexualities because homosexuality, period, is a sexual pathology. That's kind of where, I mean, I watch yours and Andrew's debate. I mean, going back and forth amongst the gametes and who, which sex or gender, or whatever you want to call it, produces gametes and which doesn't. Is there intersex conditions that allow gametes? I mean, this is all smoke screening. I mean, there is an obvious physiological criteria for what fertility is, and fertility is also a criteria of health and physiology because without fertility, you do not have a species. That's why these kinds of it's not even like a Kantian morality kind of thing. It's anti-categorical imperative
But like
even, and I'm
trans
not
people
even
can
like
be
a Kantian.
fertile. So like what's that have to do with anything?
Okay, so maybe we could get into that, but so try to categorize or contextualize fertile. I don't know what you mean by fertile.
Like capable of reproduction? There are plenty of trans people who are capable of reproduction. Same thing with gay people, especially if you consider things like in vitro fertilization or surrogacy.
Well, these are IVF is a sort of a therapy to help fertility, but it's not. It's there to assist with the pathology. You understand that, right?
Yeah. And both gay and trans people are typically fertile, at least.
Well, they can produce like these gametes to reproduce, but trans people specifically, because it is a smokescreen sort of mental therapy that's meant to help with coping with certain mental illnesses. It
What mental illness are
has
you
the
referring
side
to?
effect of destroying fertility.
Wait, what mental illness are you referring to?
I mean, gender dysphoria is a mental illness.
Oh,
I
so
mean,
that's not all
I'm
that
of the
there is to
opinion that
being trans.
homosexuality is a mental illness, but
There are
that's,
plenty of trans
I
people
mean, I
that
won't get
don't
into it.
have gender dysphoria.
I mean, yeah, I understand it's a fad now. Like it's now in and like, cool. That's like kids here find like all the hip, like California type of crap in. So
Okay,
I
so
don't
I guess
really,
let's focus on the reproduction point first before we get into like mental illness stuff. But so
yeah.
like if your point is that like we should be able to reproduce, gay and trans people can reproduce. So what's the problem?
The mode, the way they reproduce is pathological. They have to
What's
use a
wrong with
surrogate.
it? What's wrong
It's
with that?
wrong because, well, I mean,
Because your feelings
not to
disagree with
make a
it?
naturalist appeal, but it is against nature because they aren't reproducing with an actual marriage partner.
So your feelings disagree with it? And or the
No, my
appeal to nature
feelings don't
fallacy that
disagree with it. It is against nature. A man and a man cannot
that's
have
the naturalistic
a.
fallacy again, my dude.
No, it's not a naturalistic fallacy. I'm
It's
using
a naturalistic
nature as
fallacy
an
to say that
evidence towards
them
my
going through
point that it is
stop.
pathological.
They have to go through different means of reproduction. That's okay. They can do things like surrogacy to reproduce. You're saying that going
I
through
don't.
surrogacy to
I
reproduce
mean,
is
yeah.
bad because it's unnatural in your opinion, but that's the
No,
naturalistic
I'm not saying
fallacy.
it's unnatural because there are unnatural things that can be beneficial. I'm saying it is pathological. It is not as
What do you mean by
healthy for the
pathological?
baby, is not as healthy for the neonate or, I mean, the surrogate to have an IVF of a gay couple or a trans couple.
What is your evidence that like IVF babies are less healthy than like PIV babies or whatever you want to call it?
Well, I mean, I don't have medical literature on hand, but
So you're just making stuff
in
up?
cases of IVF, if I recall correctly, I mean, I could be mouthing off. I'll cede that ground, but in cases of IVF, there's probably around, I think, a 20 or 11, somewhere between 11% to 20% greater incidence of cesarean section, which is not an ideal way of delivering a baby.
What's the incidence of cesarean section for like other babies?
Like babies, like through a male and a female. That also I don't have off the top of my head. I'm not. I won't say I'm a great
So you're just
doctor, but
making
I
stuff
do.
up? Also, if a C-section is needed, a C-section is needed. So what?
Well, yeah, I'm not against a C-section because even though this is more to my point, even though it's quote unquote unnatural, it's not pathological. Because my definition of pathological, I mean, the word pathology is a study of suffering. My definition of physiology is a function and biological function that promotes life, and
Okay,
pathological as suffering against healthy living.
so
It
you're
might be a
trying to
little bit circular, but
reduce suffering? Is that's your kind of guiding principle?
yeah, that's the aim of
Okay,
doctors.
I don't think there's any suffering in letting gay people have kids via IVF or whatever.
I think there is. I mean, there's a cultural and a social issue with that. I think, as said, the whole LGBT lobby has already demonstrated that it's sort of a totalitarian kind of agenda because, as said, there are not just NGOs and quote unquote corporations, there are governments that participate in this
Where's the
kind of.
suffering? Like, I don't want you to just keep pointing to organizations or stuff. I want you to point directly to what is the suffering that's happening. Because
Well,
if you're just pointing to organizations,
the thesis of this book,
uh-huh.
which is pretty great, I think most people should read it, is that demographics changes are something that most people, but particularly of European stock, though Japan gets mentioned as a sort of Asian country that is suffering with these sort of demographic problems. Demographics changes are something that is harmful to a nation. And a nation is there, at least in a rationalistic sense, to promote the pursuit of the good. And if we're going to get into an ethical debate, I assume you're an atheist. I could be wrong. If
I'm
we're
more
going to get into
agnostic.
an ethical, well, agnostic ethics don't exist like most agnostic epistemology doesn't exist. We're going to get into a debate of ethics without a divine positive law, without the divine command theory, which is not a dilemma, but rather all commandments and laws of God and scripture, and then the body of Jesus Christ on earth, the Orthodox Church. All these commandments and laws and canon laws are there as emanations of God's fundamental goodness, as the
Okay, this
fundamentally
is
good
this is great and
principle
all,
that
but
Aristotle
you
can.
still haven't pointed to any actual direct harm. You just said that immigration or demographic changes are bad.
It is a sin.
We
It
can
is immoral.
It's immoral to like immigrate or something? What?
No, well, no, not immigrating is. I mean,
What
like
happened?
that's a
What happened
separate
to
issue.
Jesus' preachings about accept thy neighbor, like and welcome them into your home?
That is that is your own personal sort of weird theology you take from not actually reading the Bible and understanding
I've read the
theology,
Bible.
but
I was raised in a Christian household.
not Christian enough. I could tell you that for sure.
Not Christian
Um,
enough. Ouchie.
no,
So,
no.
do you have
But
any harms you can point to, or are you just gonna like rant on about God?
it is immoral and a sin. I mean, I won't rant off about God.
You're
This
still
is
ranting
the
about God by just saying it's a sin. Please, can you
transcendental
please point to
justification.
like a tangible harm or suffering? Because I can point to lots of tangible harms and suffering that homophobia, that hate crimes,
you agree
that this
that
push
you
against
can agree
LGBT
that you
people
can harm
causes.
yourself, right?
I
You
do
agree
agree
that you can harm
I
yourself,
do
right?
agree that self-harm exists.
Okay, well, homosexuality is that, and so
Can
is
you?
mutilating
Oh my gosh!
yourself.
Can you demonstrate to me how homosexuality is a self-harm?
It is a sin against your body because you're perverting natural urges and and if you know your Bible, you're giving yourself over to a reprobate mind.
Okay. So where's the harm?
I mean, you can choose to accept it or not, but this is a transcendental ethical justification
I
for
could
this,
just as
right?
easily
It's a sin.
say
It's against
stop.
not
I
just
could just
God's
as easily
commandments, but
say
against nature.
I could just as easily say my God says that being gay is a good thing, and those two arguments from religion are equally valid. So can we
Yeah,
actually
but
discuss like empirics or like measurable harms? Because I can point to measurable harms that homophobia, transphobia has on people. So can you point to
the
any kind of
mental
like
mishmash God you have in your head is an arbitrary existence that has no transcendental grounding,
same thing as
right?
yours?
No, well, no, it's the triune Orthodox God exists by virtue of the impossibility of the contrary. That isn't a fallacy, by the way, because that is a justification for logic and all sort of rational categories, the categories that allow you to even think and make senses.
At the end of the day, you're still presupposing it. I can
Yes,
presuppose an argument that is equally valid. So let's not get into this
it's not
presuppositional
equally valid
arguments.
because,
It is
as said,
equally
your
valid.
mental,
We are
like,
both
your
presupposing if we're
mental
saying that
spaghetti
God supports
monster.
gay people versus God doesn't support gay people.
Right.
Well, is okay. So is the primary foundational argument that you have against the transgender agenda, as it were, globally, does it bake down to transcendentals or does it bake down to other variables? And if it does, can we focus on those variables rather than having a theological debate? Can we get back to the transgender debate?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think I was trying to demonstrate, and why I cited Pat Buchanan's book is because, I mean, European stock have a demographics crisis, and I'm not like like a ethno. I mean, I am an ethno nationalist, but I'm not like just like an arbitrary like white man ethno nationalist. But demographic crises do need to be solved. I don't have exactly the uh, specific policy prescriptions. I mean, I have some, but just not things that I think are helpful for the purposes of discourse. But what I can say is that there are things that accelerate and only add fuel to that fire, which is this LGBT sort of normalization and agenda.
So can you point to like an empirical or measurable harm?
Yes, I mean, demographics in the United States and every country in Europe, except for Albania, and well, Japan gets brought up in this book, have a below replacement rate fertility,
What does this have to do
right?
with trans people?
Because demographics change, or at least, I mean, I won't get into the demographics change debate. Demographics decline is a problem.
Do you want to talk about immigration? Or do you want to talk about trans people? I don't see how these are related at all.
I'm not talking, I didn't even mention immigration. I'm saying demographics decline is a problem, and this sort of
What's
these
causing the
sexual
demographic
pathologies
decline?
which get, sorry, say that again.
What's causing this demographic decline that you're referring to?
Well, there's a host of factors. There was one sociologist, I forgot, but I think it was the decline of empires as well, or something like that, who said that most empires and civilizations go through periods of decadence, which bring down demographics and stretch out their empires far past acceptable, let's say, populist lines. And I think populism is I guess, a good social ideology in some regard. And these sort of sexual pathologies that keep getting spread in this era of decadence and this sort of further emergence from the 1980s to this neo-Marxist, like still, I guess, mostly Marxist, but I guess with some like
Okay, trying to paint this as some
postmodern
kind of like
influence
general
agenda.
trend that like openness about sexuality means that like we're on like a societal decline is pretty silly because we can come up with lots of historical examples that disprove that, such as the ancient Greeks, who were philosophers in their own right, and they were rather open about their sexuality, and there was a lot of gay people in Greece. So I'd rather focus on things that are like actually happening right now and
I think
empirical.
Plato being
Like
a
you
pederast is
still
not
haven't
exactly.
pointed
I
to
mean,
any
so
empirical harm.
I'm sorry, I gotta cut in again because I kind of have to side with Naomi here. I don't understand exactly how demographic shifts globally are necessarily threaded in to an argument against trans or even LGBT. Maybe you can thread that argument or the needle a little bit better because I don't actually understand
Yeah,
where you're going with it myself.
I'm not going to lay it all in the feet of the of that sort of globalist like LGBT lobby, but in some regards, it is a contributing factor. I mean, but there are other factors. I mean, obviously, I know she's not taking like a meta ethical at all stance on anything, so I'm not going to appeal to like the breakdown of sexual ethics around the world, but I do think it is, and okay, I guess I'll maybe use a leftist talking point. I think it's a colonial effort, and it's being exported to these former communist blocs before it's being exported to places like the Middle East. Qatar is set to have its World Cup very soon, and the World Cup and the whole soccer, I guess, apparatuses are all NGOs as well, but they're capitulating to these Sharia style of provisions against, you know, the LGBT agenda and even alcohol sales. I mean, I'm not gonna. Actually, I won't say anything further. But I do think it is a matter of uh, I hate using this word, but Western hegemony on exporting these values which break down the traditional Christian ethic of much of the Orthodox world, some of the Catholic world, and like places like Poland and Hungary as well. So I think it absolutely is it's a foreign and destructive ideology. If it was as much of a benevolent force, I mean, we could be searching for things more than oil down in the Middle East. But granted, I don't even think that whole operation was about oil anyway. So
So you think it's
that's my
colonial
point.
to fight for like anti-discrimination provisions, like for like LGBT people?
I
How
don't
is that?
think
How is like fighting
that's.
against discrimination and fighting against hierarchy a colonial thing?
And I'll give you credit. I think I might have tangented and rambled too much, but that's where I was threading in this whole demographics decline into this sort of agenda of the rich and powerful, the plutocrats, who want to export this first to more convenient geopolitical zones. I'm not going to pretend like this is just an operation against exclusively Serbia or Hungary or Russia, but I think it is definitely being tested on in these places first, among other things, because it is European stock. That doesn't mean I have any sort of personal, I guess, ethical beliefs on if you're white or not, but I think it does raise a few questions and eyebrows to the observing eye.
So I guess like what's your evidence that this is like some like initiative that's being like tested in various areas rather than it just being there is a political movement to push for stronger social support, stronger anti-discrimination provisions, which is backed by the majority of Serbians, as I showed in the data.
It's not, because like these events are usually violent every time they come around, like these Pride events. Well, not as much as the first
What?
time the Pride event came around. I mean, there's a whole documentary on the first time they did a Pride event in Belgrade, and I forgot the name of it. I don't even think it's a documentary. I think it's more like a historical fiction film. But that was first a quite a violent occurrence, and even though Belgrade and
So
other Serbian cities do have Pride events every June, the European Union insists on more of this sort of messaging and normalization, and that's where the whole Euro Pride thing, in my opening, why I brought that up, because the Serbia is not part of the European Union. At best, it might have some trade agreements with the European Union, but it keeps incensing and keeps bringing forth this ideology to this area of the world. I mean, I don't know if I have the article on hand exactly, but a former MI6 agent also said this whole conflict in Ukraine also one of its linchpins, or perhaps one of the critical issues behind why this is happening, is the whole LGBT issue and the European Union's and this transnational elites and plutocrats' ambitions of bringing this ideology to Russia, which is a gigantic economy and civilization that has been
okay,
railing against
so
this phenomenon.
first you try to use a single anecdote to suggest that like pride is violent. I don't think there's any data which shows that like there is a
Sorry, I hate
empirical
to
increase
interrupt,
on
but
pride being violent. And then you tried to tie this
I
to
hate
like
to
Russia,
interrupt, but I'm not
Ukraine.
saying Pride itself was violent. I'm saying the first Pride event in Belgrade got violent. It wasn't. I mean, I don't know the whole details of the story, but it did get violent. And this current one that was forced in September,
Right, but
even
you're
though it
trying to use
was
this anecdote to like paint a
illegal,
story, and that's the characterization I take issue with. And then trying to jump into like Russia Ukraine, I don't think that the Russia Ukraine conflict was caused by the existence of gay or trans people. I mean, we just know
no,
that
no,
Putin's kind of
it's
crazy and
not.
wants to take land back. Like that, you keep on
Uh,
going through these like crazy long-winded rants that just like come off completely unhinged when the actual explanation of these things are very simple. Most people in Serbia support
well, it's not
LGBT or
simple. I'm
support
not
trans
saying I
people,
didn't say
and
this. The whole
so
Russia
there is a
Ukraine thing
political
is about
effort
the
to fight against
LGBT.
Hey, let
discrimination.
Naomi respond. Let Naomi
And
respond.
there is this effort across other nations, other political institutions to fight against discrimination, particularly in areas where attitudes are better, where it is more of a successful political movement that just needs backing, that follows the majority attitudes of the people in that country. Yeah, I just think that we should just fall to Occam's razor here and just go with the simple explanations rather than trying to go to these long-winded things that you can't even prove. I mean, like you're just storytelling here. That's really all that you've got. Like you haven't pointed to any empirical harms once during this conversation.
Well, I mean, the empirical harm is that it is against nature because obviously homosexual acts and the mutilating of the body or modifying the body to sort of go along with your personal gender expression. I mean, this has nothing to do with really any sort of biological function in any animal, much less humans.
Wait,
But I mean, I'm
wait,
not
hold up. I
appealing
need to
to
stop you right there
animals as
because
like
there are animals that naturally change their sex, like fish, for example. And also being like there are gay animals. Being gay is
that's where
perfectly
I try to
natural.
clarify.
It
I'm
occurs in
not
nature all the
appealing.
time.
Yeah, but these sort of habits, maybe in the changing of sex in fish or something, it might promote fertility, but human beings are not constructed in such a way,
I mean,
fundamentally.
what do you think our hormone receptors are? We're literally constructed that we can change aspects of our sex.
No, I mean we can develop, like say, like I might have a little bit more weight, and because of the higher presence of cholesterol, and cholesterol is the sort of a precursor hormone that gets synthesized in these androgen hormones. Like, yes, I could have more estrogen if I'm overweight, or less if you're a woman and you're anorexic, and that's where like the whole uh, let's say period problems happen in women. I mean, but these hormone imbalances are pathological. They don't support the fundamental, uh, how would you say, the fundamental aim of the species or any biological life, because homosexuals can't have kids transgender people do such things, especially
Yeah,
to
but
their
I thought we already
bodies.
established that for you, like all of these kind of things don't have to just be about producing kids, because you seem to be okay with like PIV sex just for pleasure.
No, I'm saying in the context of marriage, the marital bed is blessed. I mean, usually it should be for the purposes of reproduction, but I mean, I don't get into a married couple's bedroom or their sexual ethics. But I will say what is
I
clearly
really hope that you would extend
against
that to a gay
sexual
married couple.
ethics.
That if a gay couple gets married, you wouldn't want to get
Well,
into their
gay
bedroom
marriage
either.
doesn't exist. That's just sort of like a
Gay marriage
arbitrary
certainly
legal
exists in a
status.
lot of countries, particularly over here.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's an arbitrary legal status. It's not a real union.
Yes, and your marriage designation is also an arbitrary designation.
Well, it's not. It's actually marriage is for the purpose of the continuation of, I mean, in a broader sense, the species, if we want to get into biological
So would
terminology,
you
but in terms
say
of sociological terminology, it's for the progression of the nation.
if marriage is for the purpose of procreation, then a marriage between an infertile person would be invalid?
No, it's not invalid. An infertile person, like good, I'm glad you brought that up. An infertile person has a pathology of fertility. Somebody who's married and to somebody in an infertile marriage, granted, I mean, I'm not going to get into the whole Orthodox versus other, let's say, theology's version of marriage. Granted, I think infertile people can marry in the church. An infertile person has a pathology of their physiological functions of fertility. And as a result, they can't. I mean, I'm not going to get into whether they'll have a more fulfilling life or not, but it would be better and more
So
good if they could reproduce.
if an infertile person like can't produce children, how is their marriage valid?
Because marriages are blessed by the church. That's the ethical stance.
So if I get a marriage blessed by my church, it's equally valid.
No, but if you had a gay marriage or like some kind of like sectarian uh, Christian denominations version of marriage, that would be an invalid marriage. I'm not going to say like every Catholic marriage,
Okay,
Roman Catholic marriage, or
you keep
Protestant
changing
marriage
the
is
story.
invalid.
This is the problem. First, you're like, well, marriage is for the
It's a
purpose of wait,
theological
stop,
matter.
stop. Let me explain this. First, you said that marriage is for the purpose of reproduction, and then I pointed out cases where you still support marriage despite reproduction not being possible, and then you change the story to, well, God says it's okay. You keep changing the story, and that's the
I didn't
problem.
change the story. That's the assumption that because the marriage is blessed in the church, sexual relations between that couple are blessed. I mean, they have to figure that out with their spiritual father slash priest, but uh, marriage in general, because in the Orthodox Church, and I mean in the Roman Catholic Church, but they have plenty of weird things. There's two paths to salvation. There's only two. You have marriage and you have monasticism. So monasticism is a lifestyle and a sort of calling that does not have biological, let's say, worldly functions. However, if you are a person of a civil society in any civilization or functioning society, you get married and you leave an image of yourself because that is the natural urge, because all life
Unless they're infertile.
does that. That's why it is life.
You keep on making arguments that don't hold up in the infertile case, and that's the problem. You're going to change the story as soon as we bring in the infertile case.
The infertile case doesn't matter because infertility is a pathology. It is something to be sympathized with. Like
If
even
something doesn't matter
in,
because it's I need to point out this contradiction here. If something doesn't matter because it's a pathology, you believe that being LGBTQ is a pathology. Therefore, it shouldn't matter whether or not they're LGBTQ and they want to get into a marriage. That shouldn't affect things if it's just a pathology.
This is where the nature thing comes in. Well, because a man and a woman by nature in their physiological functions are able to produce offspring, infertile man or an infertile woman, like in a blessed union, are blessed and are blessed to have sexual relations. But a homosexual couple a priori cannot reproduce unless they bring in a surrogate or some kind of medical assistance that didn't exist since the 50s.
Okay, and they can. So what?
Because the nature of the act of homosexuality is a form of self-pleasure masturbation that has no basis in a biological function of having a child. So a man and a woman have genital
that argument
organs.
would equally apply to sex with an infertile person. That argument would equally apply to sex even with a woman when she's not ovulating.
Well, that too, like sort of
Like I just don't want to live in that world where like we're only allowed to have sex with our wife whenever she's ovulating, only for the purpose of reproduction. That just doesn't sound fun.
I didn't say that. I'm saying sexual
right, because you're changing the story.
In a blessed union, and there is no blessed homosexual union, are ethical and okay.
When are you gonna give me a consistent story? Like I just can't like why do you just keep jumping around to like different points whenever it's convenient?
The traditional view of marriage that it was man and woman. You are the product of a man and a woman, as the standard function of a marriage in a Christian context. Not even a Christian.
Because the traditional
Christian context, but
because the traditional view just doesn't hold up. We know that there exist gay people, there exist LGBTQ people in nature, and it is beneficial for them to have their own form of marriages. And all of these arguments that you're using against gay marriages apply equally to infertile marriages.
I think so. Now we might be getting somewhere with this. You said that gay people exist. Well, first of all, homosexuality is not an identity; it's an act, right? So it's people who have this certain predisposition that is pathological as well. And then, okay, well, that's something that they could deal with, I guess, also in an ethical way. I mean, as said, I can't empathize with that.
You're saying that homosexual acts are pathological? They're as suffering if like a gay dude like enjoys getting railed in the ass?
Yeah, because
they have
a radically, just in like, I guess, like an empirical view, they have a radically increased incidence of HIV. So yeah, that is pretty pathological.
Okay,
but
suppose they don't have HIV. Suppose they don't have HIV, and a gay dude just enjoys getting railed in the ass. Where's the harm?
The harm is that is something that is damning for both parties, right? It is a unnatural.
No, it's not unnatural. This happens in nature. It is
unnatural.
Across so many animal species, there are gay animals that have gay sex, and it's actually beneficial to the species. It increases cohesion amongst the species. It increases the strength of the pack. This happens in lions. This happens in penguins. I can list lots of examples of animals. You can find this in the peer-reviewed literature that animals are gay, and it actually strengthens social cohesion. It's actually a good thing. It's pleasurable for them, it strengthens the bond of the pact, and it's perfectly natural. Same thing if a gay dude wants to get railed in the ass. There's no harm there. There's no suffering. He's just enjoying getting railed in the ass. And power to him. Getting railed in the ass is fun.
Lord. Jeez, where do I start? So we have also a non sequitur, I guess, in a category error in terms of referencing other species as any sort of justification for
what
the
is
kinds
natural.
of natural. So I'll cede and I'll say you were right in the sense I am rambling, and I guess I'm not clarifying correctly enough. I'm saying natural for human nature, so which might sound circular, but the presupposition of what is good.
What do you mean by natural for human nature?
Natural for human nature. Okay. So the kinds of attitudes and behaviors that humans have, which is conducive to life, and even these homosexual acts in animals, I mean, they're, I guess, aberrations, because if, let's take a Kantian categorical moral imperative. Is this morality decided as if everything did this, would this be an imperative to do this action? So obviously not. If all biological life forms engaged in this sort of homosexual non-reproductive form of sexuality, I mean, species would cease to exist. I mean, the Earth would just go away. That's
not at all.
It's decay.
Because wait, you can get railed in the ass and then impregnate someone. You can do that. We can all get railed in the ass and then still make children. Those are not mutually exclusive by any means.
I'm sorry, I try to
Bisexual
be.
people are so cool, right? They
Well,
they
we're
are the
talking
power that
about
we're missing out on
we're
here.
talking about okay, we're talking about sodomy, the practice of anal sex, and these kinds of interesting
You should try it sometime.
sexual pathologies. And that's not going to happen. But
Missing out.
geez, where do I start? So bisexual people exist. That way, the whole category of sodomy is just brought out of the equation. I'm saying sodomy, the act of sodomy. It is a act with a reason that people engage in, right?
Yeah, for pleasure, for increasing bonds amongst people, for increasing the for improving the bond of the pact. Just like how lions have both gay sex and straight sex, they still produce
So
offspring, but the gay sex actually helps lions.
let's bring it to the ethical dimension. I'm just talking about the act. I'm not talking about the justifications. Bisexual lions can practice sodomy and then, have their lioness. I'm saying the act of sodomy, what these gay people base their identity around in some regard. The act of sodomy, if let's turn it into a category of universal human behavior. What are some of the consequences of sodomy as a categorical moral action?
People would have more fun.
I'm saying, okay, imagine, I
Yeah.
mean, this might not be a good argument. I'll cede that. Imagine everybody participates in sodomy, and that is the mode of sexual behavior. We're taking straight sex and reproduction out of the equation.
Well, here's the problem. I'm
Right,
not
we're saying,
advocating for exclusive homosexual behavior. I'm just arguing that people should be able to do either. And so that's what I'm applying as a moral principle. And if people are allowed to do either, then some people get railed on the ass, some people come in pussies, we have children, and the world is fine.
maybe this is an esoteric ethical point. I guess I'll cede that. But we still have to sort of square the circle, proverbially. Like the ethical question of the LGBT phenomenon, being lesbian, gay, bisexual, or trans. So all of these are sexual pathologies, right? Because these sorts of acts do not bring about lifestyles that promote stable, let's say, nuclear families and offspring. I mean, I
There
could,
are lots of
yes,
stable
you
gay
could bring
families
a
out there, and
million.
there are more valid types of families than just nuclear families.
You think nuclear families are not also a function or categorical moral imperative that society should
I think that if
sort
people
of try
desire
to.
to live in a nuclear family, then they should have the freedom to do so. And if people desire to, say, live in a communal family or another living arrangement, they should also have the freedom to do so. I think that people should have the freedom to chase what makes them happy. And we actually have sociological evidence which shows that, like, the nuclear family is actually, like, decreases social cohesion compared to more, like, communal living styles.
Okay. I guess it's hard to sort of tackle these sort of flat allegations with just like saying there's the peer-reviewed science behind this.
Right,
How
because you
might
don't
we
have
bring this back?
empirics. You just have. I think that God says this. My
Well,
God
no,
says this.
it's not just a matter of I don't have the empirics. It's a matter of like we can't agree on things like physiological functions of fertility. We can't agree on ethical standards and metaethical presuppositions, and we talk past each other when we try to get to that sort of level of conversation. So I can only really, at that point, break it down to the presuppositional level. So, what is the justification for a societal acceptance of the whole LGBT phenomenon?
Because people enjoy being LGBT and it doesn't harm anyone.
So, I'm saying, what's the justification? That's not a justification. That is a sort of subjective sort of stance. I don't want to reference other debates I watched on this great channel, but a stance-dependent, totally subjective view of an ethical function, a reason to do something.
I think
I'm
that
asking
people
for the
should
objective criteria of what makes this hedonistic pursuit of sodomy okay.
freedom.
Uh, okay, free. It's good because people like it, and people like it because it's freedom.
No, I'm saying
All right.
it's good because people should have the freedom to do what they want in the pursuit of happiness without harming others. And being LGBT, having gay sex, falls directly into that category.
Of being free. Okay, so, but you aren't on board with all sexual pathologies, right?
I think that if there is a harm to others, then no, I would not be on board with that, such as like pedophilia, for example.
Well, yeah, that's what I was thinking of. So where do we make the delineation? Where do we have
Harm.
the justification in terms of a meta-ethical or ontological status of human nature, which delineates whether this is an acceptable behavior that society should give, let's say, credence to, give rights to,
The
or
delineation is harm. It's very simple. If I think that people should have the freedom to pursue happiness, however that whatever that means to them, so long as they're not harming themselves or others, and there is no harm in being LGBT.
okay,
Harm is the
you have
delineation.
to
There's
sort
a
of
harm in pedophilia, and so that's why that should be illegal. But there's no harm in gay sex.
yeah, the whole non-aggression principle against pedophilia sure might hold water, but we're talking about a delineation. It's harmful for society to not accept homosexual people. But by the way, they never have enough rights. And before the 60s, we were all living in a totalitarian hell world, right?
I mean, gay people can't even get married in your country.
Well, yeah, I have no problem with that. I think that's great.
So what's the harm then? I think that we should focus on the harms because I've been pretty clear that harm is a delineation point.
As said, we're saying, I guess Serbia is a place where the homosexual act itself is not illegal, like in some countries with different theological legal systems, like the Muslim world, or at least in the Middle East, the Muslim world. You're saying harm is the deciding factor on whether something is ethical, but I'm asking you the justification for why treating forms of self-harm like homosexuality is treated as in traditional ethics. Where does that fall short of the sort of justification needed via transcendental categories?
I think that if you can demonstrate that
That
there's
might have been just like
if you
a
can
totally
demonstrate that
wild
there's an
thing.
empirical harm, then we can point out that that's unethical. But you
Okay,
can't
but
point out that there's an empirical harm.
ethics is not grounded in empiricism. Ethics is a metaphysical category. You don't see ethics.
Okay. So do you just want like my axiomatic belief of freedom or what?
I want the justification for homosexuality not being a form of self-harm.
So essentially, people enjoy it, and there's no like negative externalities that come from it in and of itself.
Okay, we're taking let's say, there's no negative externalities. I mean, there are greater incidences of disease. How would I sort of try to do
Is
that?
that intrinsic to being
Treasured
gay, or is
presupposition.
that a product of lack of like resources? Because I don't think that's intrinsic to gay sex.
I think it is intrinsic to gay sex.
You can get HIV through straight sex too.
The inoculation of HIV in that form of behavior is far greater. So
Right, because there's a lack of
that's
like
why the
resources and
incidence is
education
greater.
there. These are things that can be addressed.
But the whole ethical question, right? Like we have to ground and justify our ethical claims. You're saying it's not harmful because people feel good. All right. Well, people feel good. Pedophiles feel good about their behavior,
But they harm
right?
another
Like,
because the
where's the
child does not feel
ethical?
good,
I guess now I'm getting
and the
back to
child does not
better
have the mental
train of thought.
capacity to consent to that kind of act.
Well, we're saying if jeez. the delineation of rights and consent, where also do we find these uh, sort of metaphysical assumptions about ethical attitudes towards behavior? So we have rights to certain things guaranteed in the Constitution in the US and other
Mm-hmm.
constitutions around the world. But that does not give a free range of some kind of chaotic, satanic liberalism where you just do what you want, anarchy, right?
Without
So
harming
where is the
others. That's the
delineate?
delineation.
So homosexuality as a form of self-harm, which is dangerous to public morals in
I don't
societies
think it's
that treat
dangerous to
it as,
public morals in any way.
well, it is. It is a sexual pathology that has quite a bit of force behind it
So
as a
where
political
is the
movement
harm?
nowadays.
Where is the harm to individuals? I'm making the claim that it's like not harmful. Like if you want to prove to me that it is harmful, you would have to present evidence. Otherwise, we can just default to, oh, it seems there's no demonstrable harms here.
Well, it's harmful to the soul because these sort of self-destructive acts are,
Because your God says
uh,
so, unlike my God.
well, your God is this is the problem. Your God is arbitrary and incoherent and a construction of your own mind. It's
I
not
could say
a
the same thing
personal
about your
revelatory
God.
God. No, I mean, the God of Christianity is a personal revelatory God. He is not in my mind. He is in reality by virtue
We
of
actually
the
we actually have
impossibility of the
empirical
contrary.
studies which show that, like studies on people's brains and how they light up when they're talking about what they believe God believes, like Christians like yourself. When Christians talk about what God believes on something, the area of the brain that talks about what I believe is what's lighting up there. We actually have empirical studies which disprove that.
That's not, you can't use empiricism to sort of go back to disprove the fundamental transcendental categories that are required to do things like inductive reasoning
All
and
I'm saying is that your
predicating
God
about
is
regulatory.
all I'm saying is that your God and your justification of what your God believes is your beliefs the same way that I say about my God.
Well, your God, as said, is an arbitrary mental construct that is
Yours is
not.
too.
No, he's not. He's a grounding of all truth, and
Then
by
why
virtue
is
of the
it do people's
impossibility of the
brains light up
contrary,
with
he
what they
exists.
believe when they're talking about what God believes?
Okay,
It's an arbitrary
you're
designation of
making a
what you
category
believe.
error. This isn't a mental phantasm because all of these sorts of facts and us trying to just stick to the empirics and the societal implications of these uh, pathologies being normalized, we have to then, if we're just going to keep like going past each other with our stances on the empirical data, we have to appeal to the justifications of whether this, if we have a coherent presupposition on whether this is an acceptable and ethical form of behavior that society should do something about, not even just promote or sort of not promote.
So like what I guess like you're making the claim that like God is the like foundation of all truth. Your God is the foundation of all truth. Then like
God,
how come you don't
capital
have
G God, the
how
actual
come
entity.
how come you don't have any empirics that support what your claims are? If that is the foundation of all
Because
truth, you would think
God
that there would be
grounds,
empirics that support that. Yet you have not pointed to any
God,
empirics supporting your claims.
God grounds the sort of truth in experiential claims because without a regulatory or form of nature, we can't analyze it using data and other transcendental categories like mathematics and logic.
Okay, I just don't get where you're going with this. Like, I
I'm
think
not
that you're
either. I'm not sure either. Maybe you can tie the thread
Yeah,
for us a little bit.
yeah. I might be going off on a lot of wild trains of thought, but basically, the transcendental argument for God's existence, by as far as I understand, by virtue of the impossibility of the contrary, God is the grounding of all transcendental metaphysical categories and a sort of divine conceptualism. All these sort of metaphysical concepts that we can't see and we need to do things like reason, predicate, and analyze nature, they find their epistemic grounding around the existence of God, because without him, we can't, as said, assume an inductive reasoning principle. We can't assume identity at all. As Bonson says, a toothpaste proof for God, right? Like you squeeze toothpaste and you assume the toothpaste is going to come out. How do we justify with any amount of logical weight tomorrow when we squeeze the toothpaste, or a minute afterwards, that the toothpaste is actually going to come out? That's just like one of the arguments for these sort of regulatory form of nature, like regularity in nature, and the need of and the grounding of things like the law of identity, like X equals X and X can't equal Y in some kinds of logical propositions.
Okay, I'm
And
not
I
still am not sure like where you're going on with that, but if like you want to talk about like regularity, I mean, it seems to be pretty regular that gay people exist in nature, be it gay humans, gay animals, etc.
Well, okay, but ethics is also grounded in that divine conceptualist framework, because ethics is also a category of metaphysics, right? And because God is the only one who can provide an objective law-giving property of emanating his laws and his commandments through his fundamentally good nature outside of our own reasoning and subjective stances and how we interpret text and such things like this, we then can only appeal in an objective and justified basis towards the traditional ethics of Christianity,
No, I
Orthodox
can say the same
Christianity,
about my
because that's the
God.
only theologically coherent system.
No, my God is equally theologically coherent.
No, he's not, because as said, it's
She
literally just
she says that being gay is a
your
good
personal
thing.
rhetoric. For your personal rhetoric, you are saying, like, I'm gonna make up a spaghetti monster that justifies my claims. How do you have access to that spaghetti monster? Yeah, the mental spaghetti monster's nature. How do you predicate about that being that you're making up? What is the justification for that being? And those are basically the three questions off the top of my head I would ask in any sort of theological discourse.
Well, I mean, it would have to come back to somebody creating the idea. Same thing with Christianity.
Well, God is not a created being. God is the unmoved mover, an uncreated, transcendent nature and being that grounds all truth in a coherent framework.
So how do you know that like the Bible is like the Word of God?
By the impossibility of the contrary. It is the revelation that has been brought to mankind through the tradition of the church. So, yeah.
But it was written by man. It's not the Word of God.
It was inspired by the Holy Spirit and formally canonized and given as a liturgical document by the influence of the Holy Spirit as well.
So you think
literally
the God of all good and all truths condones slavery?
I think slavery is a social ill that
if you think that slavery is a social ill, you're disagreeing with God.
No, I'm not disagreeing with God, because there is no provision.
This is exactly my point. The Bible sets forth provisions for slavery. Now you are disagreeing with God there. You are coming to your own subjective conclusions about God.
Slavery,
just like the study.
Wait,
let me finish. Just like the studies which show that people's brains light up thinking about what I believe, what I think about when they talk about what God thinks. You are doing this right now by disagreeing with the Bible, which you just claimed was God's objective word handed down to mankind.
This is just some disingenuous sort of sleight of hand. Again, I'm not disagreeing with the Bible. I'm saying slavery is a social ill.
I'm not being disingenuous. I'm pointing out how your logic is disingenuous.
No. Slavery is a social ill that had its historic period back in Old Testament times. Now,
what's the biblical justification that it's a social ill?
The justification that it's a social ill is because man is made in the image of God and is not chattel that is to be bought and sold. Granted, as said,
The
without
Bible
God
disagrees with that.
Oh, really? Where?
The Bible is pretty clear that slavery should be permitted.
Where? Yeah, I mean, many times, like you could say like random stats and all sort of humor it, but I want actual like passages and I want evidence to these sort of
Leviticus and
interpretations.
Exodus provides verses on like how you should acquire and treat your slaves. I mean, we could read from Leviticus. Leviticus 25, 44 through 46 says that your male and female slaves are to come from the nations around you. From them, you may buy slaves. You may also buy some of the temporary residents living among you and members of their clans born into your country, and they will become your property. It seems that humans are to be property if we're to follow God's word.
No, well, that's, as I said, a historical period in Levitical law, because Leviticus is a document. Well, not, yeah, it's, I mean, a book and a document which outlines the law in a specific tribal nation and a historic entity, which has since been fulfilled in a new Israel, which is the church, which does not provide a stance on slavery at all. In fact, I mean, it is a necessary evil, like many things are a necessary evil. Going to the gospel,
that the New
right?
Testament doesn't provide a stance on slavery?
I think the stances on slavery in the New Testament are more so, as said, dealing with that still prevalent social ill and that still prevalent, how would you say, historical moment which is going on.
But how do you biblically
during
justify it as a social ill? If all of your morality comes from God,
it's a necessary evil, right? So divorce.
How do you justify that?
So, right, divorce too, right? Divorce is allowed in the Orthodox Church and it's allowed in the Bible, but like Christ himself says, and even in the Old Testament, though I don't have the passage on hand, these sorts of commandments were given by virtue of the hardness of your heart, not because that these specific commandments and laws were total emanations of God's will.
But how do you know that applies to slavery?
Say that again.
How do you know that that applies to slavery?
I know that applies to slavery because the church itself does not give any provisions on slavery, at least not in canon law as far as I understand.
So, how do you know the church is speaking for God?
Because all the councils are inspired by the Holy Spirit.
Okay, so we're just allowed to make stuff up and add it to like the biblical canon now?
It's not made up. It's the tradition.
It's coming from man. It's coming from what people personally believe. At the end of the day, you still have to resort to something that some guy, some human said this is true or this came from God. You are resorting to people's personal beliefs of what a hypothetical God believes. I could do the exact same thing. I just don't think it's going to go anywhere, to be honest.
You can't, because you don't have a specific. So out of all the religions in the world, I think I also saw a debate to this degree. 6 of them are not polytheistic in a sense. Zoroastrianism, however, is like a dual theistic religion. Christianity is sort of in a unique, how would you say, theological position. For one, because it's the Orthodox Christianity is the only truth in terms of a theological backing.
Well, of course you would say that because that's what you believe.
Well, it's also justified. It's a coherent epistemology that I can actually predicate about and can account for things like regularity of nature, inductive principles, and such.
Right here, there's never a good place to end a debate, but we're at almost the hour and a half mark, and we have to get to our callers before we can get to our super chats. And I wanted to give both of you guys an opportunity to make a strong closing case for your arguments. And in this case, you opened first. Eminem, we're going to let you close first, and then we'll let Naomi close last. Go ahead. You have 7 minutes on the clock.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have much to say for my closing, I guess. I think, how would I say? I think it was in some sense a fruitful discussion, at least in regards to how do we square sort of empirical and biological principles with newfound cultural moments like, the LGBT phenomenon. And I mean, I think it was okay in some regard. I definitely could have done a little bit better, I'm going to be honest. But yeah, I don't really have much else to say in regards to that. So thank you. That's my time.
Okay, go ahead, Naomi.
Yeah, I mean, quite simply, my opponent has never been able to provide a valid, demonstrable justification for his opposition to LGBTQ people other than my God says so. I could say the exact same thing. My God says that LGBTQ people are good. I think that this framework of my God says this, my God says that, just gets us into these, long-winded conversations of, oh, well, who's the real God? And at the end of the day, everybody that's making the claim that their God is the real God, there is a level of subjectivity in there. People that claim that their God is the right God, all religions are saying this, and all religions, have this, same kind of equal weight in that there is this presupposition that goes on in all of them. And I just don't think that, focusing on things where it's like, oh, my God believes this, which we know from empirical evidence from, studies on people's brains, is the same thing as I believe this. So essentially what's happening here is my opponent is using long-winded, philosophical, religious words to justify his own personal feelings. And I think that, he can have his feelings, but I'd rather focus on the facts and the data on whether or not being LGBTQ actually is harmful or helpful or how it actually affects society. And what we've seen is that being gay, being trans, being socially accepted for being this type of person, being able to access the medical care you need helps people. It improves their mental health, it improves their overall well-being, and in the long run, if people are happier, if they are more mentally healthy, they are able to become healthy, productive members of society, and that is good for everyone. I can provide direct empirical justifications that anti-LGBTQ discrimination, that support for LGBTQ people has empirical, measurable good for society, and my opponent has never once brought up anything that is an empirical justification of harm because he can't do it. That's why he knows he has to dance around all this fancy logic and sophistry. I'll close there.
Thanks for that closing statement, Naomi, and thank you
Always a
both.
word salad.
Thank you both for making your debut today on the Crucible. Now, because this is your first time here, I need to explain to you that after the closing statements are done, we consider the debate closed. I'm able to engage, and callers, of course, are able to engage. And there's still usually a bit of back and forth that goes on, even when the callers are on, and we expect that to happen. But for this particular debate, I have to take a moment here because it's important for me to say, Eminem, on this, you need a lot more practice at debate. You were summarily routed on every single individual point that you brought up, to the point that while I was taking notes and going through, I could not find a coherent, singular argument that was not countered within seconds. And this is the Crucible because there's no mercy here, and the callers are also still not going to give you mercy. So you must suffer, and this is your penance. So I hope you enjoy. Okay.
It's exercise. I always need more exercise.
All right. Synth, you're up. Go ahead.
Geez. What's up, bud? Yeah, you said that trans people, by being trans, were in part responsible for population decline. Are you of the position that if trans men were to live as men instead, there would be a lower population?
Well, first of all, I didn't say that. I said it's one thing that could contribute to a demographic decline.
Yeah, that would mean you did say that. Are
Say
you saying
that
it
again,
could,
sorry.
like just like in terms of like it's logically possible, like a contradiction's not entailed?
Sorry, say that again.
Yeah, you said now you said you moved the position now to it could be the case, right? Are you just saying a contradiction is not entailed?
I think it is a factor. Yeah, I absolutely do. I absolutely do think that will
then you do think it's a factor.
phenomenon.
Okay, so what I was asking was, are you of the position that if trans women were to live as men instead, there'd be a somewhat larger population, at least a somewhat larger population? That was the question.
Again, you said trans men were what? Sorry, I have a hard time.
No, I said that I'm talking about what I view as trans women, right? So I'm talking about people who were born, right, with a penis, right, and then they present as a woman. If they were to live as men instead, not present as a woman, but instead present as a man, and call themselves men, do you think there would be a somewhat larger population? The answer to your question, to that question, should be yes. Should be a clear yes.
If trans women were pretending to be men and then
I didn't. Okay, if you think that trans women would be pretending to be men, then you would think that trans women are women. Is that your view?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, I thought that your view was that trans women weren't women.
well, sorry again.
The group of people that I'm talking
My
about are
brain
trans,
is
and I
short
define the
circuited.
term.
I think so a man who's transitioning to become a woman is a man, right?
Okay, yeah. You
And
view
your
this.
argument is if they still had, let's say, fertile relations that would.
I didn't make
Okay.
any argument. I'm asking you about your position. I'm just asking, are you of the position that if those people that you just described, right, people who you think are men at birth and then become, or like pretend to be women, is what you view them as, right, were to live as men instead, there would be a larger population at all? Would it be at all larger?
No, because I think the underlying sexual pathology does not promote a sort of stable familial culture that could bring about healthy offspring.
Oh, well, that's actually a better response than I even thought I would have to. I thought I would have to walk you through why the math doesn't work out, but I'm glad that you just concede that that's not relevant to your argument. I have one more question, I guess. You said there are stance independent reasons.
No, I was literally referencing the debate I watched between Ask Yourself and yourself, and stance independent reasons. I mean, I'm not as well read on the philosophy on that kind of terminology, but I do believe that stance independent reasons exist. Yeah, absolutely, I do believe stance independent reasons exist.
Oh, that's interesting, because I thought your position would be the reasons are independent of God's stance, but I don't know. That's interesting. So I guess
that's basically what I was alluding to. The stance independent reasons are the kinds of ethical, let's say, laws and commandments given by the lawgiver, the grounding
that would
of.
Just be a stance. But I guess there's one more question I want to ask. Then I'll leave you alone, right? You said it's logically impossible for God to not exist. Can you go ahead and show how God exists would validly follow from God does not exist? Because, like, obviously it's going to entail a contradiction if it's logically impossible.
I said it's the impossibility of the contrary, because you couldn't have a justification for the logical categories that presuppose the kinds of things necessary, right, for making logical claims.
Did you mean some other kind of impossibility? Like, you think it's physically impossible for God to not exist?
I think it's impossible in all worlds. I guess in like some philosophical sense, it's impossible in all possible worlds.
That would mean logically impossible.
Say that again.
Well, that would mean logically unless you mean unless by possible worlds you mean the physically possible worlds, then that wouldn't make much sense. But I mean
all kinds of like mental constructs. I think it's impossible to sort of justify any of your claims and any of your
modality means?
Term modality, different modes of approaching any kind of thing. Yeah.
No, I mean specifically as in like modality, like within like possibility statements. When we make a statement about you can do this, or it's possible that that's the case, or it's necessary that this is the case. Those are all types of ways you can use what's called modal language, right? Modal language just means that like there's going to depend on some modality. That's why I was saying logically impossible. Logically impossible would be the ones that apply to the broadest category of things. Is the case that the everything that's physically possible would also be logically possible. But some things are logically possible, but not physically possible, right? So, for example, one thing that's logically possible, that would be me picking up and throwing a car, right? I can't do that. I'm very thin, right? I wouldn't be able to pick up a car. So it'd be physically impossible, but logically possible. There's no contradiction entailed. Do you think it's the case that, there's a contradiction entailed by the statement God does not exist?
Say that last part again.
Do you think there's a contradiction entailed by the statement God does not exist?
Yes.
Okay, so could you go ahead and show how God exists validly follows from God does not exist?
God exists. Well, first of all, that's a contradiction, right? I think that's sort of like a.
You said a contradiction follows from God does not exist. That would be the contradiction, right? Any contradictory statement actually would be following from it if a contradiction follows from it. Yeah.
Well, I'll see that I don't really understand this sort of modal language talk. Yeah, I'm definitely not well read on
modal language talk. I'm just asking you to show the contradiction.
The contradiction of God. So, I guess set that for me in a syllogism. I guess. Sorry for making it a little bit.
I wouldn't be giving you the syllogism. I'm trying to get you to give me the syllogism. You say God does not exist entails a contradiction. What I'm trying to get you to do is show me how God does not exist entails God exists. You would have to show it entails a contradiction. I'm trying to get you to show the entailment. I've even given you the contradiction, right? I told you what the contradiction would be.
Maybe this is like a law of excluded middle
Contradiction, right?
problem where if God, so if I say
Nope,
like
that wouldn't apply here. Not even a little bit.
like X is God's existence. I mean, I don't know the exact syllogism for the transcendental argument, but
Well, there just isn't.
how would I
It's
say?
an invalid argument. It's like fake philosophy. It's like sophist philosophy that like people on YouTube pretend to be philosophers with.
I mean, as I said, I'm not well read on it, but yeah, I mean, I don't buy that premise still.
Yeah, I don't buy the premise either. That's why I'm saying it's fake philosophy. What I think is
No,
there are plenty of
well,
stronger arguments for God. Like you could have just stuck to the unmoved mover and at least had like something there. Transcendental argument is just gonna be nothing. It's just gonna be the case that like somebody could just say, oh yeah, we just can't know anything, right? And there's just nothing there. You've got like all you can do is like hand wave and like be upset about it.
well, then you'd have to sort of justify those claims. We don't know anything. Do you know that claim?
No, you don't have to justify it.
Okay.
The claim that you can't have justification for beliefs doesn't need to be justified. It's just a claim. It wouldn't be the case that they're claiming
It wouldn't be a justified true belief. I mean, it could be. I mean,
we gotta wrap the
happen.
call. Gotta wrap the call, Sin.
Yeah.
Finish it up.
Sure.
Finish it up.
One last thing. Yeah, I'm sorry. That was way more than 2 questions like I was supposed to go with. Yeah, Montenegrin metal. You know what a Gettier case is?
Gettier case, is that
Yeah.
sort of the divine command theory like dilemma?
No.
I forget.
No, Gettier cases will be like an attack on justified true belief being a definition of knowledge. So it's just like if I have a justified false belief, or we like have justified false belief or unjustified true belief, that would together constitute a justified true belief. Very clearly not knowledge. I could just have a good reason to believe something I'm wrong about, and then I could have a correct guess, and those two things together can be combined into a belief which would technically be a justified true belief. Clearly not going to be sufficient for knowledge. I don't know. I'd recommend like reading anything about philosophy. That's my advice. Just read literally anything.
I mean,
this is
as
like-
far as I understand the distinction, is it, if I had to ask the question, is it better to just have a true belief without justification, or is it better to have a justified true belief?
You're asking what question?
No,
I'm asking the question.
Oh yeah,
Guys,
Andrew said I have to
guys,
stop.
We
asking.
can't.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, that's true. Yeah.
We'd have to set this up for something else. We got a lot of callers back behind you. Thanks for the call in, Synth. I appreciate it.
All right, peace. You have a good one, Andrew.
You too. And then Rachel, I'm going to go ahead and skip her to the front of the line because she sleeps with me. Go ahead.
Take that, everyone who doesn't believe in the patriarchy. Hi, hi Naomi and Montenegrin Metal.
Hello.
Wow, this was a heck of a debate. So I think
Yeah.
Montenegrin Metal, you are a smart guy. I can tell you're a smart guy. However, I don't know how much that translated as the debate went on, because you had a nice
No.
opening that you had a chance to think about, beforehand and kind of write out. And then you kind of got lost in the sauce trying to present lots of information to maybe like get the point across that you know a lot of information, and that I think you actually are pretty well versed in a lot of the stuff you were trying to talk about. However, you didn't really engage with Naomi, and you had a lot of things in your opening that you could have attacked with. So if it were me and I were in your place debating gender and culture, I would have put Naomi on the defensive immediately. And I would have, rather than letting her continuously put you on the defensive and say, do you have any evidence? Can you justify that? Can you provide an argument? And then you're kind of like meandering around trying to look for something, trying to figure out like, okay, what direction do I go? Because I have so much I could work with. You should have put her on the defensive and kind of said, what's your justification for changing the definition of gender? Do you have any evidence that this would lead to, depends how you want to go about it. If you want to talk about outcomes, if you want to talk about, you could even do the transcendental argument, but that's something that's tough to do with somebody in this sort of an atmosphere where that person's just going to say, I don't care about your God. I don't care. I don't believe in your God. And then you have to sit there and give all this background information on orthodoxy, if that makes sense.
Got to get to your question.
Yeah. Well, my question is, I guess, for Naomi. So if the topic of the debate, at least the title, says gender and culture, how do you feel about feminism?
I love feminism. I love the idea that men and women should be treated as equals.
Okay. And if we treat men and women as equals, like what we've had, about 100 years of feminism now. So I'm guessing you still think there's a lot of fighting to do there and there's still some inequality we have to work on. Where do you think we still need some work with equality between men and women?
Yeah, I think that much more so broadly, I think that we can do better in terms of social attitudes. We have lots of, peer-reviewed studies, empirical data, which shows that like gendered socialization really causes boys and girls from a young age to develop these different attitudes on average about boys and girls, and often unequal attitudes, and we can see how this pans out in harms to everybody. The idea that women can't be as good working in like a technical job than a man, or even the idea that the man has to be so emotionally stoic that he can't show any emotion, that he has to be physically tough, and that he has to it creates kind of these aggressive patterns that I think for different reasons, harms both men and women. And I think that broadly, socially, culturally, we can move towards a society where, we move towards things like gender neutral parenting, treating people as equals, and, just like correcting kind of like myths that develop if people say that, oh, like men have to do this or women have to do that, or men should do this, women should do that, just on the basis of being men or women, for example. I think that we can do better in terms of just being more equal to people.
Okay, so see how I asked Naomi a question and she gave me that big long diatribe full of academic speak that she's probably used to from her whole bubble of everybody applauding and saying, yes, very good argument, very good stuff. There was about 100 things you could attack there. You could go into, you know, family dynamics, divorce rates, harm for children, rates of alcohol abuse. I mean, there's tons and tons of data and stats you could go at. So
Is it a
yep,
debate lesson, or are you gonna
it kind of
ask a
is.
question?
I just wanted to call in to kind of demonstrate, like, because I think MM has like good potential, but next time he could put the opponent on the defensive so that he can find openings for attack and then just relentlessly go down that road rather than him kind of meandering around. That's all I wanted to say. So sorry if you didn't like it.
Get off the Crucible. Get out of here. Get. All right, Zen Shapiro, you're up. Go ahead.
Hey, you hear me okay?
Can hear you okay.
Okay, thanks. I would ask for just a little bit of extended time, though it might get cut short because I did bring some backup with me. I brought someone who would show everyone what the purpose and the plan of sex and marriage is, so you can all follow suit, hopefully. But my question, Naomi, to you is, you said basically your standards for sexual morality would entail they're basically revolving around harm, right? You're saying if an act is harmful, then it's immoral, and that would pertain to somebody's sex or their actions regarding sex. So typically that would involve like violating their person, their autonomy, their consent. So you'd say things like rape is wrong, pedophilia is wrong because children can't consent. So let me ask you this: what about consensual incest between two adults? Would that be harmful? Would that be immoral?
That's a really complicated one. I think that if it's going to like lead to reproduction or have the potential to lead to reproduction, we can look at like how that can create a lot of genetic issues. I think that you certainly can talk about how there are harms that exist there.
Okay, but
sorry, I have to interject here. Sorry, Zen.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll say what I was going to say. So go ahead.
Yeah, Richard Dawkins is actually famous for positing this probability as well. What about gay incest?
Yeah, just somebody who, like, you could even say just like if they wear a condom, cut their tubes or whatever, so they can't reproduce. Would that then be wrong?
There's also some interesting like hierarchical power relationships there that I think are very complicated, especially between like even different siblings. There can be some very like hierarchical power relationships that don't imply perfect informed consent, much like how, say, like somebody who was like a teacher versus a student, there's kind of like different power structures there, especially between different siblings and stuff.
Right. So your first objection was regarding reproduction. And if we take that out of the equation, you kind of go to this vague generality of power dynamics, which I see leftists go to often. I've heard this many times before, but I don't even know what you mean by power dynamics. Like there's power dynamics in literally every single interaction ever that's ever occurred in the history of the world between two human beings. There's a power dynamic there, but that doesn't make it wrong, especially if both parties are consenting, right?
I think it depends on the extremity of like the power dynamic. I don't know if it's easy enough to kind of like give like a blanket statement here, but I mean, especially if you have, say, like a sibling who is like much older than a younger sibling, it can be.
What if they're twins?
If they're twins,
Same age, yeah.
Oh gosh, I mean, I guess like I don't think that if they're like exactly same age, exactly same like attitudes, I don't know if there's necessarily like a moral argument against that.
Right. So, okay, that's the problem, though, is that this paradigm that you propose actually would permit incest, assuming there's no power dynamics, whatever that even means.
Okay,
and I
and
guess even
if there is no
reproduction,
power
but that could
dynamics,
be
what's the
attacked
harm
too.
with that? You know?
Yeah, it's just funny. It's rhetorically, it's just funny that like you would have to permit incest in your worldview, which I think a lot of people would cringe at. But then, okay, so
You can personally
I guess
dislike
that's
incest while still recognizing that there's nothing necessarily like immoral in very limited circumstances.
yeah, that's cringe. Yeah. So like seriously, the end of that debate is just like you're cringe. I'm gonna Chad hom you because like that's disgusting. So the other thing I wanted to attack was your meta ethical framework, like because you believe in evolution, right?
Yeah, evolution's real.
Yeah. So in that worldview, the only real deterministic mechanism is the natural selection process, which clearly is selecting for reproduction, right?
I don't think that.
Reproduction has been a trait that's selected.
So
for.
just because evolution is real doesn't necessarily mean that we need to do everything that we can to.
But that's your
like,
that's your
foster it.
only meta ethical framework that you can appeal to that has some deterministic mechanism, which is again natural selection. That's the mechanism that selects for what is ideal, what is sustainable to a population, etc. Right?
I don't think that we have to necessarily like try to use external factors to support it. I think that like just because evolution is real doesn't necessarily mean that we have to do everything we can in our power to
But
select for
homosexuality
the
is not
best
an
like
evolutionary.
genes or whatever. I'm not in general a fan of eugenics because of the harms that you would have to do to engage in eugenics.
Yeah, but so homosexuality is not a trait that evolution has selected for, correct? That would be something you would call maybe a mutation, something that's unideal in the gene pool, right?
Well, then why are like also so many animals gay? I don't think it's necessarily
I
an,
don't think
an
they are.
unharmful trait at all.
I think that's a lie. I think you're making that up.
You think I'm making up that animals are gay?
Yeah.
Do you want
I'm
me to
not
provide
saying I'm not saying that no animals.
Do you want me to provide a
engage
source
in,
about like gay lions and
I'm
how
not,
it like
no, hold
strengthens
up.
the
I'm
bond
not
of the
saying
pack?
that no animals engage in like sodomy or whatever, but the idea that so many animals are gay is a lie. It's like 1 in a million.
We
It's
have
like
we have
so
never
exceedingly
observed
rare.
exclusive heterosexuality in any species that has sexual reproduction. We have
That's a
never
lie.
observed that.
Yeah, that's a lie. So
What's a species
anyway,
that we've observed exclusive
either
heterosexuality
way,
in?
okay, I'll just grant it to you. I'll just grant it to you that it happens, but either way, because it's so exceedingly rare, because it does not contribute to the sustainability of the population.
No, it does actually help. It
clearly it's
strengthens the
not a trait
cohesion and the
that
bond of the
evolution would
pack.
select for.
No, it's actually literally selected for in lions, for example, because
What's
it strengthens the bond of the pack.
benefit to homosexuality?
Strengthening the bond of the pack and increasing social cohesion.
Okay, how does that strengthen the bond of the pack?
Because sexual intimacy brings the pack together.
Okay, and you don't think that there could be power dynamics going on there?
I suppose there could, but it doesn't seem to be harmful in practice.
See, it's funny, you just backtrack on all your principles every time they're questioned, in another regard. You're doing it right now. When you say that there's a power dynamic that makes incest wrong, but now there's a power dynamic that makes homosexuality good. It's ridiculous, it's arbitrary, and
Wait, what's the power
flip and
dynamic?
flop wherever it's convenient for your argument. It's
Not at
ridiculous.
all. What's the power dynamic in homosexuality and lions?
I don't think power dynamics are a coherent, basis for like objecting to some action. I don't think that there's any coherent basis to go on there. So I think it's just a cop out.
Well,
But either
I
way,
didn't make the claim that there was harmful power dynamics within lions.
Yeah, no, okay. I'm saying, don't you think that when there's homosexual relationships going on, whether it be between lions or humans, there could be power dynamics there too, right?
Sure, same thing with straight couples.
Right. So it's not, I'm saying that power dynamics are not actually a coherent objection to a given action, because there could be power dynamics in literally anything, in literally any action.
Yeah, it's a circumstantial objection.
Right. So
Because
and then,
power
but then when
dynamics
we're
by
talking
their very
about-
nature are circumstantial, but I think that it's one
Yeah,
worth
and then-
considering within the harms framework because they can lead to harm. For example,
Yeah,
a
and then
teacher
when
and
we're
a
talking
student.
about evolution, when we're talking about an evolutionary worldview that you believe in, the natural selecting mechanism is going to select for reproduction, and the most sustainable way to reproduce and continue to reproduce Homosexuality is obviously not that, and that shows in our birth rates,
Seems
which
to
are
include
heavily
that in
declining while the
lions.
homosexual population is growing. So clearly, this is not something that's ideal in your worldview.
I don't.
You're just
Wait.
coping and saying that it
Hold
is
up. I
because it makes you feel
never
good.
made the claim that like reproducing as much as possible is like the universal good. But also, it seems that there
Then
are
what
certainly
is?
cases and species where
Wait a
like
minute, wait a
being
minute.
gay. What?
In an evolutionary worldview, what is the universal good?
I think that the pursuit of self-actualization and happiness is more so the universal
Yeah, but
good.
in order to sustain self-actualization and happiness, what do you need to do?
Some people would
Reproduce.
need to reproduce at least.
Yeah, the population would need to reproduce,
Yeah.
right? So, but if you have
And that's
if
a
you have
part of
growing sect the
self-actualization and the pursuit of happiness for lots of people, which is why it's fine and it works out
yeah,
just
but if you have a
fine.
growing sect of the population that is non-reproducing, which homosexuals are non-reproducing, as much as you want to cope and say, "Oh, bisexual," no, you guys are not reproducing. Homosexuals don't reproduce. Bisexuals very rarely reproduce.
Gay people
So
reproduce
it's not,
and
it's not
adopt.
something
They
that's
do
ideal
both.
in an evolutionary paradigm. It doesn't work.
Gay people reproduce and
No,
they
they don't.
and they adopt. They literally do both.
No, they literally don't.
You gotta have to thread it and end your inquiries in.
Okay,
Go ahead.
that's all. That's where I'll end it. I guess it's just. I'm just saying that, like in this evolutionary paradigm, you would want to select for things, or you would want to look for things that are selected for by natural selection, which would entail reproduction, which homosexuals are not doing. The birth rates show it, and there's no argument to go on here. It just doesn't fit into your paradigm, and that's it. You can respond. I'll go off stream.
That wasn't my paradigm, but also like homosexual alliance has been shown to help the pack, and it seems to be reproductively favorable, considering that it still exists in a wide extent in lions. Yeah, no, like gay people reproduce, especially with the modern technology we have. That is not a defeater of gay people by any means.
What do you do about the conundrum, though, that while it's true that is homosexual behavior in animals, that whenever there's a viable female present, they always take the preference of the viable female, which would include lions.
They don't always take the preference of the female.
If there's a viable female present, they will always take the viable female.
No, we actually have a
over male.
counterexample of this. There were some gay penguins. I think it was the New York City Zoo. One of them was bisexual and did take the viable female, but the other penguin remained exclusively homosexual.
Yeah, but there was only one female.
Right, but we're imposing like human sexuality categories
I believe there were
on
multiple
animals,
females
right?
that were present, but there was one gay penguin that did not have sex with female penguins. He only wanted to have sex with male penguins.
Yeah, but
Well,
let's
penguins
assume
like
that-
rate each other like. So, oh, sorry, that's.
Yeah,
I
I don't
don't
want to dive into it too much, but
Yeah.
because it's not for me to debate. But I did just want to kind of know what your thought process was on that. Big Hoss, you're up. Go ahead.
Hey, howdy. I just want to talk about this. This is about like gender and culture, right?
Well, it was supposed to be. It kind of went off the rails a little bit, and I couldn't
Well, no,
really
it's okay.
save
I
it,
mean-
but it's
I mean-
okay.
The meat of what one of my question was, the main question was just like, children are growing up in like, and whenever I was growing up, it was certainly becoming like super normalized. But like, I can only imagine what it's like for children nowadays that grow up and they have it all forced on them, and they're made. Not only is it becoming more normalized, but it's also looking normal. When at least to me, and I think just a lot of people, it just isn't. I mean, I don't want that to sound harsh. It's just what it is. But because the human body, it's not like a light switch. You can't like take a little boy and put estrogen in his bones and just turn him into a girl. The genitalia, like, it just doesn't. So it's like, what
Do
is
you
this like?
caller? I'm sorry. Do you have a directed question?
Yeah, it's to Naomi. It's like, I mean, do you want children to really be exposed to this and to really go through like gender hormone therapy at such young ages, or to be put on puberty blockers and stuff like that so they can decide for themselves, even though that like causes obvious damage to them or something?
Okay, so yeah, I'd love to respond to that question. The first point you kind of brought up is like, is it a good thing or is it a bad thing, or do I concern about people being exposed to this? I think it's actually a great thing that society is becoming more normalized and accepting towards LGBTQ people, and part of that does include exposure. Things like diversity and acceptance education, just teaching people that, hey, there are types of people that are gay, that are trans. You can explain this in using age-appropriate language, obviously, but this idea that there are types of people out there that are different than you, and that's okay, and they deserve, equal, love and respect. that's actually a wonderful thing because that reduces implicit biases that are already forming in people's minds. It leads to less bullying, less social ostracization. And, when gay people and trans people are less ostracized from society, they're more so able to live a happy, healthy, productive life where they become contributing members of society. If normalizing the existence of gay people makes it easier for, say, gay people to become doctors and like cure disease and stuff, that's awesome. But then talking about, what should we do about, like, say, if there's a trans kid that wants to transition, I think that we should follow established medical guidelines that are backed by research and data. And it's a good thing that the overwhelming body of scientific research has come to the consensus that, yes, gender affirming treatments for trans youth is a good thing. And, as far as like, as early as that would start, that would involve like puberty blockers around the age of 12 or so, cross-sex hormones a couple of years later, and then typically surgery 18 plus if that's desired, which is a big if. I mean, only 8 to 13% of trans people even receive like bottom surgery, for example, which is quite the minority of trans people. But broadly speaking on this, I would say let's just follow the established research medical guidelines. And there is a pretty clear, overwhelming academic consensus from the American Medical Association, American Psychological Association, American Endocrine Society. They all point to research-backed guidelines that show that this improves the well-being of trans youth. And that's awesome.
Sorry, I do want to interject, though, and just posit one question, and then I'll mute again. But so is there physiological criteria for fertility? And I'm just putting the question out there, and you can answer how you want. And what would that look like if you had to guess? I mean, there is, but
what do you mean by is there physiological criteria for fertility?
Is there certain kinds of functions of the body that promote fertility?
Yes, obviously.
Okay. Does transgenderism assist that?
Not typically, although there are many cases where it doesn't like detract from that, and we have like fertility treatments that exist for trans people to become fertile again while transitioning.
Yeah, I won't get into it again, but I'll let the caller go on with that.
The main thing that troubles me is that like those puberty blockers, they don't like they basically disable you. Like you cannot that like if it doesn't fully like cause you to be infertile, it like makes you totally like it stunts it completely is what I'm trying to say. Like it's not, like I said, it's not a light switch. You can't just turn off and on like and then choose. And like even if they do or don't choose to go with like the bottom surgery or whatever else, it's like even then like it's just, doesn't it seem like you're going out of your way to like cater to something that's just totally unnatural, especially if like you have to go through all these surgeries where it's like cutting your face open, sawing down the bones of your skull to look like a woman or look like a man, or adding on like a skin graft. It's unnatural. Why push for this upon children of all things?
You can make that argument about literally all of modern medicine, that all of modern medicine is unnatural, but it helps people, and that's why we do it. And
No, it isn't. Medicine's supposed to promote physiology and health.
That gender transition is helpful for trans teenagers. And we actually have practices that require, trans teens, for example, to go through months and months and months and years of gender therapy before they get any kind of treatment. I think that the WPATH standard for puberty blockers is like at least 6 months of gender therapy and a gender dysphoria diagnosis. And then you would continue, years of gender therapy before you could even go on cross-sex hormones, typically like 2 years later. So like there's lots of assessment that goes into this, just like with any kind of medicine. We give kids antidepressants, we give them ADHD meds because they help them. Even though these are unnatural medications, they help them to live better, healthier, happier lives. And the same thing's true about trans people.
How do you classify natural? Sorry, I have to ask again.
Occurring in nature.
Okay.
Appreciate that.
That begs the question, but okay. No, it's okay.
Thank you so much for that call-in, caller. Appreciate it very much. Cass, I see you down there. I can pull you up right now if you want, but if you stick around till the end, I'll give you some extra time. Give me a thumbs up if you want to stick around till the end, or you want to come on now, give a thumbs down. Okay, gotcha. Significo, you're up. Go ahead.
Hey, am I coming through?
You're coming through.
Andrew, I had a cigarette on my desk just waiting to spark it up with you, and you just went ahead and smoked it. And I was about to donate $100,000, and you lost
Okay.
it.
Well, let's do this
So,
instead. You can keep the 100,000, but we'll do it together. Ready?
all right, let's do it. All
All
right,
right. All right.
beautiful.
There we go. Go ahead with your question, man.
So, okay, question is for Naomi. I'm admittedly, I guess, transphobic by modern leftist definition, but you did seem to argue your case pretty well. So, I want to ask you something genuinely. First is a quick question. This is not a gotcha. I just want to make sure I'm not misrepresenting you. Do you believe that gender is binary, or do you believe it's more on a spectrum?
Are you specifically referring to gender as in more so a socio-cultural distinction, or are you talking about biological sex?
The first one.
Yeah, gender absolutely exists along a spectrum, although it would depend on the
Okay.
specific society that we're talking about. Throughout human history and across different cultures, societies have had different conceptions of gender.
So then my question for you is this. Can you give any meaningful distinction between somebody's gender and somebody's personality? And I'd like to follow up if I can.
Yeah, so essentially, I more so apply the experiential sociological framework of gender. So I see gender more so as society assigning certain roles and expectations to you, regardless of whether or not you fulfill those roles and expectations. Therefore, you could be gender nonconforming while still being gendered in a certain way, and that way your personality would be different than what is expected of your gender.
So if I may, the definition that you just gave does still to fall under the definition of personality, because I would say that if somebody does not, like for me, I'm a guy, if I didn't feel right providing for a family and raising children and, all the traditional man stuff, right? If I didn't feel comfortable with that, it would be because I have a feminine personality. Isn't that correct?
Right, but you're still a guy. I don't think that personality equals
Correct. And
gender.
again, like you said, we're not talking about sex, we're talking about gender.
Right.
So if I don't feel fulfilled in that kind of role, that's because I have a certain personality type.
Right, but your gender is still that of a man because society still expects and perceives you in that role.
No, my sex is a man, right? And my
Your sex is
gender.
male, but your gender is a man because that's your lived social experience, regardless of whether or not you fulfill that role as a man.
So does that mean that gender is how other people perceive you and that's it?
Well, under the sociological framework, that would be the core of gender. Gender
But
identity
if
would
that
be
if
psychological.
if that's the case, respectfully, I view you as a man. Does that mean your gender is man?
Maybe to you, but broadly to society, most people
So
perceive
there
and
is
treat me
no
as a woman.
definition of gender then? So you're a man to me and you're a woman to you, then there's no meaning. That's just
We could
like
observe things on a
arbitrary.
broader social trend. When I go out in public, people simply perceive and treat me as a woman, and we could even do this in like a measurement study, seeing how people gender me as I move through public. We can definitely make, we could definitely come up to data-driven ways to analyze like how society genders a given person.
So I look like a man and I walk like a man and I talk like a man. And if I go out in public and people perceive me as a man, but I identify as a woman, which of those two is my gender?
Under the sociological framework, you would still be a man.
But what's the actual answer to it? Because the gender has to have a definition, right? There has to be a truth. There has to be what actually is. Which one is my gender?
I would say man in that instance from the sociological framework.
Even though I define myself as a female in that hypothetical?
Under the sociological framework, you would still be a man.
I'm not sure I'm understanding then. What would be the point then of there even being the word gender if I can identify as whatever I want, but it doesn't matter because it's what other people see me as?
Well, that would be gender identity, which is not the same thing as gender.
Okay. I think I'm probably pretty confused, but I do think did make a good point. I will let you guys go. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for the call in, Significo. Appreciate it very much. Big Hoss, if you're still there, he had cut off. He did have one last section to his question. I did want to circle back to you because you're in studio. Can you hear us, Big Hoss?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, go ahead with the last question before you cut off.
That was pretty much the last part. But I mean, I caught back the stream before I don't doubt that they're medicines that help people and everything like that. With their mental disorders and everything like that. But like 70 plus million people in the United States are on some type of like medication for like a mental disorder of some kind. It's it doesn't mean like they help, considering like how a lot of people are like just crazy. You know what I mean? I feel like just a lot of it's even if like a child or a teenager thinks they're transgender, it usually would. It seems to be the case that it just goes away as they mature into their own natural sex or wherever else like that, right? As they go through their normal hormones and everything like that. Maybe if they're gay, they may become bi or wherever else. I don't know. But I mean, that's just them. But I mean, it just seems from the studies I've seen that, you know, they who have the transgender thing with the brain, they think they're whatever. You know what I'm trying to say? Sorry,
Yeah, I do understand what you say, and I think there's a bit of an error there. So what you're referring to are persistence desistance studies. Actually, before I get into that, I wanted to mention real quick about the point of, you know, obviously lots of people are in medicine. We know it helps some people, and that should be the point of, you know, therapy, psychiatry, for doctors to determine whether or not a medicine is going to be helpful to someone and to only prescribe it to people that's going to be helpful. Obviously, this is not a perfect process, but I think overwhelmingly it's a pretty good process, and it's one that we can only get better at with more research and data, which I think we will continue finding research and data on trans people. But talking about kind of like the persistent desistance studies, people often misinterpret those because essentially what those studies analyze is out of everybody who's referred to a gender clinic, how many of them end up identifying as trans as adults. And the truth is that most people that go to a gender clinic to receive gender therapy are gender nonconforming cisgender children. That is true. That's why most of them don't come out as trans as adults. But we have specific studies on trans kids that socially transition, that genuinely identify as the other gender. And these studies show that they overwhelmingly do not detransition at all, especially those that go on to take hormones and stuff. I have a study that was done in the Pediatrics Journal 2022. It was a longitudinal study of 317 binary trans kids that had socially transitioned, and then it examined them 5 years later to see whether or not they remained in that trans identity. And out of all the kids, 97.5% still remained in that binary or in that transgender identity. And out of those that went on to take cross-sex hormones, which was 98 of them, none of them detransitioned.
Ay, 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 ay. You can find a study for anything nowadays.
No, you
I'm
can't.
just gonna leave it, man. I just gonna leave it.
Gotta finish it off here, Haas.
No, I'm gone. That's it. Sorry, I don't want to take up too much time.
No, you're good. Thank you so much for your time
Walking
today. We
on the big
appreciate
boss is
it.
my kind of guy. I like the Outer Heaven logo.
I don't know. Oh, from a Metal Gear? Is that what that's from?
Yeah, it's from Metal Gear.
Yeah. Elron, can you hear us okay?
Oh, yes. Can you hear me?
We can. Go ahead.
Okay, cool.
And remember, so like not just for you, but for all callers who call in, you know, like think of it like Jeopardy, right? It's not to come on and just like make declarative statements about what you think or what your opinions are. I don't actually give a shit about those. It's for questions or for making an argument. All right. Just saying. Go ahead.
All right. Yeah, I had a similar question to Zen Shapiro. Unfortunately, he already asked it, but now I'm even more confused. So my question was regarding to Naomi's definition of harm. Let me elaborate what I get from her definition of harm. It sounded to me like when she described harm, it was only physical harm. And when I like to categorize people in groups, you know, and when I'm looking at her group, like the LGBTQ community and so on, the overwhelming majority of those people are of the opinion that not only wrong speech is harm, but also just misgendering or even silence is violence, right? So have I understood you wrong? And by the way, is it correct what I understood from the question of Zen Shapiro, that now you also claim that it's not only physical harm, but genetically harm, because that would be based, because I'm into eugenics.
No, I'm not into eugenics, but I do think that you can also justify mental harm as a real harm, for sure.
Okay, so cool. That would mean, do you think that Andrew, for example, or me, right, are harmed by your opinions? our culture, our way of living, our way of thinking, how you you know, even architecture, right? Your ugly architecture, your ugly art, your ugly movies. Does that affect our psyche?
Well, you don't have to watch those movies. If you don't want to participate in an aspect of culture, you don't have to.
Let's say you live in my neighborhood, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you do your little demonstration of pride. By the way, I think pride, when you do the pride parade, which is basically the system's official demonstration, the foot soldiers, right? It has a very specific categories of who is included and who is excluded from it. So the message from the system is you can have pride, but someone like Andrew or me, we can't have pride because our pride is hate to you, and your pride is hate to us.
Wait, what pride are you trying to have?
I'm proud of being a white male, white cis heterosexual male with traditional beliefs, okay? And that is harmful to you, such as your opinions, your worldview is harmful to my way of living.
So
Yeah,
I think that it's important to analyze
it's
these
really a
things much
war,
more so
right?
on a
Who
societal
will
level
win it
rather
at
than an
the end?
individual level, especially if we're talking about like broader social movements. But I mean, you also have a right to assembly.
So you didn't answer my question. I'm not here for the debate, as Andrew pointed out, right? I'm just here to ask questions.
Sure.
So what is your definition of harm, and was I wrong at my description of your definition of harm?
I would classify harm as suffering, be it physical or mental.
Okay.
Well, he's trying to go back to like the whole cultural point that I tried to lay out in my opening statement, which is that many cultures view public morals as influencing their legislation, and this kind of trafficking of these ideologies is something that's rightly viewed as a form of harm and a deliberate attack on sovereign nations that have the right to do whatever they please with their legislation. I won't go too far more into that.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, I think that everybody has a right to have their own beliefs. However, like once that inaction starts harming society at large, I think that, you know, at that point there's a pretty strong argument against it. And
Okay,
we've
but
seen how
societies and
LGBTQ
cultures for
discrimination
ethical
does harm
reasons
society at large. It
view
does create
One at a
demonstrable
time.
harms to gay and trans people. And so I think that there is a real demonstrable harm there, but I don't think that you can, you know, like necessarily come with any like demonstrable harm that the existence of gay people does to somebody that wants to form a white pride like rally.
Okay, so we have now basically, it was a good answer. So I think we have established that your definition of harm is another definition of what I perceive as harm towards me, right? So I think we can come together on that. My second question and last question would be this. Are you standing also for the concept of transracialism or other kin, I think it's called, right? If a human believes he's really an animal. Do you also promote that kind of thinking?
No, because
And
those aren't
if
grounded in
you,
things that you can actually change. You can actually change your lived social experience in relation to the sociological framework of gender, and you can actually change many aspects of your biological sex through medical transition. Being transgender and/or being transsexual is grounded in things that you actually can change. Meanwhile, transracialism, you can't, you know, like actually change your race, which we have defined as a category related to essentially people's genealogy, and you can't change your species.
so we know, okay, so
You got to tie it off.
it
You
is,
got to tie it off here,
yeah,
Elron.
yeah. The last point. So we know that the difference between the sexes is greater. The genetic difference between the sexes is greater than between races. So that makes no sense on a biological standpoint. What I think
I'm
you
not talking about
are,
race as a like set of genes. That'd be more like ethnicity. I'm talking about race as we define it as like the political category of like genealogies.
So what I get from your question, and then I will end, is basically under your intersectional framework of victimhood, it's not allowed to. That's what I get from it, because the biological differences, as I stated, is clear between the races or ethnicities even, right? It is greater then the sex differences are greater than between ethnicities or races. Okay.
Race isn't
Thank
the
you for
biological.
having me, Andrew. Have a good night.
Yeah,
And
thanks so much for your thanks for
answering.
your call in. We always appreciate it. Thanks so much, Elron. You can go ahead and finish your response,
Yeah, so
Naomi.
race is not a biological construct. That's the error in the logic there. We have defined race politically vastly differently throughout our American history. We used to define actually people as different races depending on what fraction they were black. Like it used to be the case even on like the U.S. Census that like if you were half black versus a quarter black versus an eighth black, we're all separate races than just black. This goes to show that race is a political category that is designated by genealogy, not a biological category. That would be more so the specific parts of ethnicity that are biologically heritable, which those are things you can't change. And so like that's why that doesn't make sense. Or like the I guess the genealogy is something you can't change. That's why it doesn't make sense to say like you're transracial. But as far as, you know, transgender, transsexual, these are things that you can absolutely change, at least partially.
Well, if there was one thing there that confuses me though, because if the change is just external socially and there's no biological category even for race, then couldn't somebody just pretend to be black and adopt that lived experience?
Well, I think that there are people that kind of do culturally
Rachel Dolezal.
adopt other cultures. Or if you're talking about people that like get procedures to change their skin color,
Yeah,
they're
like
not,
why
they're not
is it
changing their
wrong?
race.
Why was Rachel Dolezal not transracial?
Well, she didn't actually change her race. She just changed her skin color.
Yeah, but you said that race isn't a biological categorization, so nobody has a race. It's just a social experience. So if it's just a social experience and someone can change it and live that same social experience, how's that not transracialism?
Yeah, I could really be Eminem here, and then I could say I'm black and like reap a bunch of sociological benefits of doing that kind of thing because that's my lived social experience, right? It's
But
arbitrary.
you can't. We prove these we prove these things of race along like genealogical lines, not along like the lines of skin color.
That's just like your personal, like you view the history of American legislation and say this is a evidence towards a genealogical understanding of race, which
Yeah, but
I mean,
I guess it's just for me. If you wouldn't mind just humoring me before I bring the last caller on, if what you say is this is a non-biological category, but rather a social construction based on lived experience, I think okay, that's acceptable. But then if that's true, if somebody can formulate the identity where they experience the same social lived experience as somebody who is that same socially perceived race, how are they not transracial?
So that's I think that we're kind of conflating like race versus like skin color here, and I think that's the issue. There are like if somebody changed their skin color, that absolutely would affect their lived social experience, but they're not actually changing their race. That's the difference here.
Yeah, but they have to be if race isn't a biological category. If they just have the same,
no, race is a political category, not a social category.
Yeah, but if you have the same lived experience in line with that political category, then how are you not part of that race?
You wouldn't have the same political experience because you wouldn't have the genealogical tie. When we talk about issues of race, we're typically talking about systemic issues, how historical injustices have consequences down the line. And so that's why like you're not actually changing your genealogy, you're not actually changing your race.
Yeah, but why would genealogy matter?
Because that's how we define race as a political category.
The
idea of race is a construct of colonialism and those political systems. But before then, there was just like skin color. We didn't really have race as a category.
All right. Well, I can't.
Germany was like split, like the German view of race, because there's like 3 nations in Europe with German as their primary language. It was divided into like 7 different races as well. So where is the political delineation, right? Before colonialism, because there was a time before we had big ships and taking people and telling them they were bad because I don't know what. Just like,
well, if you're talking about Germany, that's absolutely post-colonial, and the fact that they had these 7 different categories is evidence that it's a political category.
So this is before colonial times with established colonies in places like Australia and South Africa and the United States. I'm talking like 14th and 15th century. The Holy Roman Empire, right?
Yeah, there's still elements of colonialism in that.
Okay, sure.
That one confuses me, I must admit. But I'm going to move on to our last caller, Casimir. Go ahead with your questions.
First of all, I want to denounce the debauchery that has preceded me. Absolutely unacceptable. And congratulate both participants in their first debate on the Crucible. I have quick questions to everybody, sort of, so I would prefer quicker answers. From Nominal Naomi, do you believe that reproduction or just the general continuity of society through generations is important to your system of morals?
Generally, like at least in terms of sustaining, yeah.
Yeah, so it has to be like society on average has to have around 2.1 children per family or per capable adults, just so that it sustains itself. The 0.1 is for various tragic events before people can procreate, right? So it's generally right around that number.
Yeah, unless there's like an overpopulation crisis or something.
Well, in an overpopulation crisis, we would still have to, let's say, plan a reduction of the population or whatever, but then we would have to create a static system, right? So, and it's tied to it has to be tied somehow to your morality. Like if whatever you believe is good, it's not only good for you, it's good for your children, right? Or like children in general.
I think it kind of depends on the individual person, like what specifically is good for them. I'm more so a proponent of freedom.
It doesn't matter which individual. Let's say that can you distinguish between, let's say, any group that is generally supporting of human flourishing versus, let's say, a death cult that says humanity should cease to exist? Like, that's a strong binary, right?
I don't tend to like view things in binaries, but there are absolutely people that want to, have repopulation, continued population. There are people that want to like end humanity. Yeah, those both exist. Although I don't know if it's necessarily like a black and white binary.
Like I personally, my moral intuition is that people that want to end humanity, doesn't matter by which morals they operate. That's like a category that's immoral to me. I don't know if you share that idea, because then if we share, we don't share moral systems probably, but if we share the idea that continuity is important, I have like a quick follow-up question.
Yeah, I would say that continuity is at least somewhat important.
Okay, so I'm looking at the total fertility rate by religion, and I know this is from Pew Research. I remember a more granular one. On the more granular, if you look at religions, the more orthodox they are, doesn't matter which orthodoxy, Jewish, even some Buddhist, like more orthodox, Christians definitely, like Catholic and Orthodox, even groups like Mormons that tend to be very insular, they have very high fertility, right? And as you go away from those groups towards less rigid groups, more reform groups like Reform Judaism, or more secular groups, fertility drops rapidly. So, for example, unaffiliated is like 1.7, so it's below replacement. Some general Buddhists is 1.6, other religions 1.7, is much smaller ones basically. The folk religion is 1.8. Judaism in general, overall reform and everything is 2.3, and then everything else is higher, including Christianity, Hinduism, and so forth. And this is across almost the entire planet, more prominent in the USA. Would you see that those results as somehow representative of a moral issue in the societies that don't reproduce enough?
Not necessarily. I think that there are certainly people within each of those societies that do reproduce, and I also don't think it's necessary for like everybody within a given population to reproduce for us as humans to continue the human population race. And if certain groups of people, they themselves don't want to reproduce, I think that they should have the freedom to not reproduce themselves. But as long as there are other groups of people or other people that are reproducing, and that allows us to continue the human race, that seems like a generally good thing.
Well, the problem is for me is that I don't conflate like permissibility with morality. Like, yes, it's permissible for you to behave in immoral fashion, or like in a fashion that damages society, like you, even yourself. But it's not necessarily something I would call out as good. Like I would try to discourage it. So when I look at, let's say, New York City, I know that in New York City, the groups that are reproducing are the deeply religious groups, and the groups that are not reproducing are people that are higher intelligence, academia, workers in those fields, people that tend to be more liberal about the things that you generally support. They would be on your side in this debate, and yet their society doesn't demonstrate to me that it's reproducing enough. Now, I don't think that I'm not claiming that just because I see this correlation, it's causal, but I wonder whether you would consider this as an empirical fact. Is your attitude that it's a problem that you have to solve, or is it just like something we should disregard?
I think that it definitely depends on the reasons why they're not reproducing. If we can attribute it to, say, like economic alienation, essentially people don't have the money, don't have the economic resources to support families, and they want to reproduce, then yeah, that's absolutely something that we should be addressing. But if just like an individual person doesn't want to reproduce, I'm okay with that.
The studies actually show that richer people reproduce less, and it's like you have more there's more abortion with poor people, but in general, the groups here, I don't think it actually correlates with the income. I don't think people are, especially in like a welfare state in terms of the United States, like the New York City, it's not a problem like having children. You're encouraged to do so by the welfare. The more children you get, the more welfare you have.
I'm pretty sure that even with the welfare systems we have set up, it is economically, you will do worse if you have children. Like they are much more of an economic cost than an economic benefit that you're going to gain from the welfare. And so there are certainly economic systems in place that do disincentivize lower income families from reproducing, that I think that if they want to reproduce, then lifting those barriers would be a great way to achieve your goal.
Okay, but generally you do perceive that that's a problem, right? That if I find a correlation that atheist groups don't reproduce enough, that's like a problem that needs to be solved. You have to like either dig down into the economics and solve the economics of why don't. I agree, maybe it is economics, but somehow religious groups that are under the same economic limitations, Orthodox Jews are not like rich by any means compared to the the people in Manhattan who have a Reformed Judaism faith, generally do better in society. So or Christians, again, more religious Christian families, Catholic families don't tend to outperform atheist families on income in my city, for example. And yet, so I do see, I don't see the economic correlation. I see a correlation specifically with religiosity, with people that believe that fertility is good.
And I'd like to interject, I guess, here, and to put a fact, I guess I read in an article or some study as well. Out of all the, I guess, religious groups that are identified in some sociological studies, the Amish are perhaps like the most fertile group out of any sociological category that is observed in the U.S. And they're specific. They have a lifestyle of asceticism and a lack of economic desire. So that's, I guess, maybe they don't.
I would have to disagree. No, the Amish are a problem for your case, Metal, because they are also pacifists. They don't have a prohibition against anything. They just ostracize it.
That's true. The Amish, part of their, I guess, religion and how they practice their religion is that they have no involvement in any political life whatsoever. But that sort of insular group does seem to have the highest fertility rates in the whole country. So there has to be, I guess, I don't know the economic factors there because it's an agrarian lifestyle, but I think there probably is some correlation there in terms of like the religiosity and how fertile.
If I can weigh in, I think that we've established that there's lots of factors that are going to impact, the fertility rates of different populations. There can be economic reasons why people may or may not reproduce. There can be, cultural reasons, broad personal beliefs. And I think that, I do enjoy that we have a diversity of humans and a diversity of cultures out there. And so if, people want to do certain things, they should be able to do that. And as long as, within this diversity of cultures, we still are seeing acceptable, population rates such that, humans aren't all going to die out, for example, then yeah, I think that I'm pretty satisfied with that outcome.
Okay. I want to switch, if I have some more time, just briefly to Montenegrin metal. I did have a couple of questions for him.
All right.
If you don't mind, Andrew.
Go ahead.
Sure. Okay. So Montenegrin metal. First of all, it was sort of recognized that you didn't do too well. You had some problems. So if you have, I don't know if you have a notepad or you want to approach me later, I believe there is an article you must read just to understand it. I'm not sure it applies to your arguments.
I have a notepad open here, but I didn't use it too much during the debate, unfortunately.
There is a dictionary of philosophy released by Stanford.edu. It's like plato.stanford.edu. And it has a brilliant article you must read, and most people in chat should also read if they're debaters, about species. Now, species there is not like just animal species. Species, the word, means defining a group, identifying groups in nature, in reality. And when you talk about marriage, marriage in your mind is like a category that is like a nominal category. That's one thing.
Yeah.
When you translate it to reality, it becomes a species of thing in reality, potentially. It could either have like a one-to-one equation. For example, marriage is just about reproduction, or it could have multiple clusters that are defining it, like marriage is the worship of the Lord. Part of it is fertility. So if you miss one part, it doesn't nullify the marriage because worship of the Lord is there as well, right? So I think it's very important because what you've been pretty much obliterated in that question is a very classical name the trait from Naomi. You know, you named the trait, she removed that trait, and now your marriage is just like arbitrary. Just like anyone.
Well, yeah, that's what I tried to hit on with the Orthodox conception of marriage and the idea of the marriage. Like St. John Chrysostom specifically says the marital bed is blessed for any relation outside of fast, right? I mean, any healthy relation,
there's a purpose for it. I think if you would explain the purpose, people would sort of get the argument that there is a reason why God wants to procreate, because humans are mortal, and but worship is eternal. So if humans are mortal, worship will disappear. Worship disappearing is not good. We want to continue the worship. Therefore, we need to have children. Therefore, there's the blessing. When you connect it like that, it's easier for you to sort of to recognize these. And sometimes you have to bite the bullet. Maybe you have to say in a debate that, listen, that's not a complete marriage because it doesn't produce this, or, you know, I won't go into too deep, but it's more complicated than you think, and that article possibly can help you. Can possibly help Naomi as well.
Right before this, like half an hour before the debate, I do like to peruse Stanford's philosophy journal, and I was looking on Nicomachean ethics and Aristotelian ethics on the idea of social cohesion and going towards the good, but it didn't really delve too much into that. I didn't really see issues.
I have a name the trait our argument question for you now. The question that I've prepared. You see, I understand that fertility is good, right, from your perspective.
Yeah.
So something that will contradict fertility would reduce it, would definitely be bad. Then be like less moral of a behavior.
It depends on the context, but yeah.
Okay. So if you take cylindrical objects and put them on fire and insert them into your mouth, right, and suck on them, and perform that operation, and it reduces your fertility. Therefore, that's an evil action, right?
I'm a fan of the host of this channel, but yeah, I mean, I'm not too much better in that regard, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting the parallels, the irony we have here.
Kaz, just to counter this argument, it could also be possible that due to mental stress, that would lower my fertility far more significantly than the actual smoking does. And so therefore, by your same logic, smoking is good because it leads to better fertility, right?
Yes, but you have to admit there's something Freudian about it, right? Especially the debate about other forms of insertion of cylindrical objects into orifices.
Okay, you're done. You're done. Get out of here. Get out of here, Kaz. Get out of here. Fucking guy. Thank you for the call in. I appreciate it. All right. By the way, I have a bunch of kids, right? So what? I got a bunch of kids now, Cass. All right.
Yeah.
We got to get to the super chats. We're right on time, surprisingly. I'm always happy when that happens. So
Yeah.
we'll dive into the super chats, get you guys out of here right about at the 3-hour marker, I think. Georgie Porgy sent in a $2 super chat and said beer and smoke fund, right? Already helping with that fertility, I see. Redfish Bear sent in a $10 super chat, says absolutely nothing, my favorite kind. Wicked Wally sends in a $5 super chat and said suddenly lions being called a pride makes a lot more sense. That was a pretty terrible dad joke, but less terrible than most of his dad jokes, I'll admit. Face Palmer sent in a $10 super chat and says nothing. Thank you. Demon Bear sent in $2, says nothing. Love it. Borp sent in a $2 super chat and said, who won this debate? Nobody.
Thank you, Andrew. I know. Listen, we're working on the Serbian-Irish relations here, but yeah, I mean, I definitely could have done better, but I'll say it's a draw.
Okay, Ciority sent in a $5 super chat and said to both panelists, what are your thoughts on detransitioners? I think that's a great question.
I think that's fantastic. I was really touched by Milo Yiannopoulos' conversion/detransition story, and actually he's been very much sort of a pioneer, or at least he says he's a pioneer in trying to bring back detransitioning therapies for not just like transgender people or people who have had that operation, but also homosexuals who want to like go back to normalcy and all that stuff. So I think that's pro therapy. I think it's pro health. So I'm very much an advocate for that. And it's pro repentance. And that's what it's really all about.
And then to Naomi.
Yeah, I think that detransitioners should be afforded the exact same level of social acceptance, respect, and access to resources as trans people. It seems to be that there is a very small portion of trans people that do want to detransition, although we do know that the overwhelming majority of detransitioners do so due to external factors related to they can't afford their hormones, people aren't accepting them or supporting them, and not because it wasn't right for them. That's only a very, very small minority of the detransitioners. But I think that, moving towards a world where people are just more cool with people being gender nonconforming, gender atypical, having a wide variety of certain sex characteristics will be better for trans people, detransitioners, intersex people, all gender nonconforming people. If our society is just like more cool about gender and we have like less rigid roles and expectations, that's going to help everyone. And I think that we can provide the medical resources and the social support for everyone. So that's what we should do.
Okay. Anonymous, he tipped $10, said nothing. Man, these are the best super chats ever. I love the super chats. They just say nothing. Just like, here's my support, right? No letter, no text. Jim Bob with a whopping $50 super chat says absolutely nothing, but somehow managed with $50 to say it louder than everybody else did. Over on the Dono chat scene, let's see what we got here. All right. I would rather be working. I would rather be working in a cotton field and living a life of camaraderie than giving a false perception of freedom while being a wage slave for a foreign company that I share nothing with for $5.
Oh yeah, well, we didn't even get into wage slavery, but yeah, I mean the whole social ills of slavery, really functionally they haven't even gone away because unfortunately, I mean class doesn't go away. I mean Marx isn't going to solve these issues. I don't think anybody really will because nature is a hierarchy.
And then did you want to engage with that, Naomi?
Well, I would certainly agree that kind of like wage slavery and these class issues are a problem. And I think that it's a problem worth addressing. I don't think that there is necessarily this natural hierarchy that's going to emerge. I think that it's more so that power gets passed down from generation to generation. And when you have power, when you have wealth, you're able to continually perpetuate that wealth and keep inequality there. So if we're having a Marxist critique of our current system from Montenegrin Metal, I can certainly agree to a Marxist critique of our economic system.
I don't go. No, that wasn't a critique. I don't go to the heritage of my forefathers of the last like 70 years and accepting that bullshit. But I will definitely say, I mean, like power gets passed from one generation to another. I guess what's the ethical imbalance between power being shared from one generation to another?
Okay, last one. Did you hear about the gay lion pilgrims? They landed on Pride Rock. Terrible joke. About the worst joke I could ever imagine, right? But maybe the perfect joke to close this debate off with. At the almost 3-hour marker, we're getting out of here right on time. Go ahead, Eminem, and shout your channel out one more time, or whatever you want to shout out one more time before you go.
I guess my Twitter at Aricado1. And I have a YouTube channel that I might post like some fighting game stuff on, but I really don't like having like the social media presence. So
understood. And then once again, Naomi.
Yeah, you can find all my stuff on my Linktree /nominal.naomi.community. You'll find all my links there to my TikTok, my YouTube, my Twitch. If you're interested in seeing more debates or want to have a personal conversation with me on stream, feel free to reach out because I love doing that stuff.
Of course, and of course, you're welcome to come back here for future debates if you want to, Naomi. And we will get your links down in the link tree. Just remember that the Crucible is a brutal place, but we are brutal to everybody. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, from all of us here at the Crucible to all of you out there in Crucible land, have a wonderful night.